Am I the a-hole for not allowing my destitute mother to live with us? My parents were divorced when I was 3. When I was 8, I got my mother to sign custody of me over to my father. The why/how is relevant, but I'm trying to keep this short. Anyway, I lived with my dad until I was 27, when I got married. He gave me free room and board all those years too. Fast forward about 10 years. I'm now 37, my wife and I were looking at buying a house. We found a large property big enough for a main house and 2 in-law house types. We didn't have enough money to build the in-law houses, so we approached both my parents. We told them that if they gave us some money, we would each build an in-law house. So, for example, from left to right, Mom's house, my house, and Dad's house. When we approached my mom about it, she blew us off as money hungry trying to get her money. My dad, on the other hand, jumped at the idea. So he sold his house and gave us everything he got for it when he sold it. Since my mom wouldn't be living near us, we changed the plan slightly and built one big house with a separate entrance for my dad. So he got his own kitchen, living room, bedroom, etc. It's a whole house in our basement, but a separate driveway, garage for his car, etc. When we built it, we also made it for our kids, but our son passed away. So we have 3 decent-sized bedrooms that don't get used. We originally planned for 3 kids, but sadly, that didn't work out how we wanted it to happen. After we built the house, my mom retired, and we threw her a retirement party at our home. During the party, we sat outside talking, and the conversation about money came up for retirement. My mom told her sister how she wanted to spend her money in retirement. One thing she wanted to do was to sell her house and use the money to travel, etc. Her sister said she wanted to save money to leave her kids as a legacy. My mom said snarkily, "A legacy? Why would I leave a legacy to my kids?" During this conversation, I told my mom it was not about leaving me money, but she needed to save some so that if she got into her 80s and needed help, money was left to care for her. When I said that, she said, "I can take care of myself." My mom is now 83. Her husband has dementia, and she cannot care for him anymore. She has no money, and with recent rent increases, she can't afford to make rent anymore. She used to own a home but sold it to travel. She called me asking if they could move in with me and my wife to help care for her husband and her. I still remember the legacy comment from 13 years ago during her retirement party. While on the phone, I flat out told her, "Told you so," and said, "You said you can take care of yourself, do it," and hung up on her. What YouTube channel is a goldmine of entertainment? Watcher, Ryan and Shane are fun and hilarious together. They do a lot of spooky things and ghost investigations but a slew of other fun stuff, too. Weird, Wonderful World, Puppet History, and Too Many Spirits. They used to be on BuzzFeed Unsolved, and their stuff on that is good too. It's worth a watch and a chuckle or two. Lord Bung, mainly, I have to recommend this one because of one reason. His series Confinement. If you like SCP stuff mixed with humor, you'll love this short but ongoing series. He's still working on the next episode, and admittedly, they are few and far between but totally worth a watch. Critical Role. For fans of D&D and non-fans alike, Critical Role plays Dungeons & Dragons campaigns set in their own homebrewed world. All of the players and DM are professional voice actors and create and play characters that you'll learn to love. If you are a fan of D&D, you'll likely be kinda 50-50 on it. Liberties are taken, and its huge impact on the community isn't always for the best in some people's minds. They also do one-shots, short single-episode games for those not in the know, if you're not interested in following a campaign. Episodes are about 3 to 4 hours long, so it is a time commitment. Crash Pandas is an excellent example of a wild one-shot that is totally worth watching. It's a riot. It's safe to watch with kids, but understand that it is not intended for children. Dark subjects as well as mature themes do often come up. Language 2. Meet Canyon. Are you a fan of dark, twisted commentary on current social issues via disturbing animation? Meet Canyon is for you then. That's really all I can say on this one. Just be warned, this stuff is not for kids. Over. Simplified. This channel is informative and takes wars and major world events, dumbs them down slightly, and sets them to animation to teach history. Serpa. Design. What happens when a man with an art degree and a passion for plants, water, fish, reptiles, and toads gets a YouTube channel? He builds wildly cool enclosures and ponds and other homes for them. It's fun to watch everything unfold as he does his builds. Theorist channels. To date, there are 4 separate channels here: food, film, game, and fashion. They use science and the real world as well as some fictional data to prove or disprove theories on some commonly overlooked aspects of their respective channels. It's a hoot to nerd out with them, and you can learn something which is also cool. The Y-Files. This has already been posted here like crazy, so I'm gonna let others do the talking on this one. But it is fun and worth checking out. What are some psychological facts about men when it comes to love? When someone is in love, you will feel it from miles away. Although attraction can be mistaken for love, you can distinguish between the two by looking out for certain signs. Note that everyone feels love differently, but in most cases, if a guy loves you, he will show most, if not all of these signs. Clinging. A guy who is in love with you will feel loved and more attracted to you if you cling to them in front of people or other attractive guys. It apparently increases their self-esteem. Addictions. If a guy really loves you, he will be addicted to you. You will feel like the world to him. Suddenly, breathing, sleeping, eating, and living revolves around you. Actions speak louder than voice. Psychology says that if a guy loves you, he will not always say it in words but through his actions. Guys feel more comfortable showing love and girls prefer speaking love. Flirting. Psychology shows that guys may spend their days flirting with other women, but at the end of the day, right before they fall asleep, they will think about the one they truly love. Love and breakup. Research shows that guys fall in love and also express feelings of love so much faster than women do. Men also end up getting hurt by a breakup more than women do. Jealousy. Studies show that when men are in love, they are more jealous of their young and attractive female partners, while women tend to be jealous when their male partner is wealthy and high in status. Compliments. If a guy loves a girl and gets compliments from her, he will never forget it for the rest of his life. Respond quickly. If a guy is in love, he will always respond to his partner quickly. It could be through text, phone call, or simply whenever his partner needs him to be around. One of the main signs that a guy is no longer in love or interested in a relationship is not replying quickly. Flaunts you. If a guy is in love, he will want the whole world to know about it. Therefore, he will hold your hands whenever he enters a room, touches your hair, or face in public. If a guy is no longer interested in a relationship or has fallen out of love, he may flirt with other women while his partner is present. Always be present. Studies show that when guys fall out of love, they tend to disappear or not be around as often as they used to. If a guy is always present for occasions or simply when you need him to be, it means that he truly loves and cares for you. You will also find that a guy in love will make you his priority by texting or calling to check up often. My golden child brother got shamed after he challenged me girlfriend in a tennis match. She destroyed him completely and he made a fool out of himself. I have been dating my girlfriend for a year and a half. She's a lawyer and pretty professional with most people, so many people who don't know her well take her for a person who only knows how to work and nothing else. She doesn't usually correct anyone. But she is good at a lot of things. My brother and I have always had a kind of rivalry going on. He was the golden child and still loves rubbing things in my face. It is mostly playful, but it gets very disturbing at times. Ever since I started dating my girlfriend, things have escalated a little bit. He would find the smallest dumbest mistake I make and turn it into a huge issue. My guess to all of this is because my girlfriend is an achiever and he can't challenge her. My parents like my girlfriend very much and maybe he's not used to not having all of the attention and praise. We were on vacation with my extended family, including my uncles and cousins, and my girlfriend was also with us. There was a tennis court and my brother started challenging everyone to a mini tournament. My girlfriend is an excellent tennis player but was talking to my dad, so she said she'd rather pass. He wasn't having it, but I talked my brother out of it and said my girlfriend wasn't interested. After a few games, my brother came after her and started jokingly teasing her about being scared to play. My girlfriend accepted the challenge and he was being smug at my girlfriend, telling her not to cry if she lost. My girlfriend was just laughing. The game started and the smug look on his face turned sour. She destroyed him in court. Literally. Everyone was cheering for her and he lost the game. He later told me I was an absolute off for allowing him to make a fool out of himself. He said I told her she wasn't interested and that he thought I meant she didn't know how to play. I still don't know what his issue is, but I kind of feel guilty after he lost so badly. Should I have told him my girlfriend was a pro? Movie buffs of Reddit. What is your favorite fan theory for any well-loved and popular movie? The machines are the good guys in the Matrix. If you watch the Animatrix, you see that the machines tried to be democratic members of society, and when the humans wouldn't let them, they create their own country. The humans then wage war against that nation. The machines at any time could make the planet unlivable for humans, but they never do. The humans actually have the bright idea to block out the sun because the machines are primarily solar powered. The machines convert to nuclear, then win the war against humans. Then start plugging humans into the Matrix, an inferior source of energy to nuclear. I believe the machines put the humans in there to keep them safe from the hellscape they created. They never truly eradicate the humans that have escaped the Matrix, just keep them powerless enough to protect themselves. When Agent Smith is ranting about how much humans disgust, in part 1, the other agent is skeeved out, and even says, "What are you doing?" Agent Smith is an outlier, threatening what the machines collectively want. The machines even ally with the humans against Agent Smith, an alliance the machines readily accept because they always wanted to get along with humans. They call off the attack on Zion, ending the cycle of destruction and rebuilding. They have no reason to honor Neo's terms after he dies, but they do because they wanted peace all along, allowing the humans the belief that Neo fostered a peace and they should relegate their conflict with the machines to inside the Matrix works perfectly for them. No human or machine deaths. Humans that can sense the Matrix get segregated. Zion and the machine nation coexist. It's everything they ever wanted.
I'm kicking my pregnant teenage daughter out of my house. I have been with my fiancé for 3 years and he has a daughter named Kim who is 19. Kim has always had a bad attitude towards everyone, especially me. Kim is 3 months pregnant and living with us because we have more room for her and the baby. The baby daddy stays sometimes, but he has 2 jobs along with studies, so it's mainly been me who's taking care of her. A few days ago her boyfriend came over, so my fiancé suggested we let them have the house to themselves and go for a walk. About 2 hours later I came home and noticed my dog was missing. Kim hates my dog and wants me to get rid of it. I asked her where he was. Kim said my dog ran out the door. I knew that was bullcrap. Whiskey is an elderly dog who wouldn't even go out on the porch if I didn't bring him. So I checked the Ring camera. Kim dumped hot water on Whiskey, then literally kicked him out and forced him to run off. My fiancé tried saying that Kim is pregnant, I should let her off and her hormones are all over the place. I was in tears till I looked over at Kim with a smug satisfied look on her face. I effing lost it. I got up in her face and screamed that she had 1 hour to find my dog or all her stuff would be in the dumpster and I was done being her servant. She said she wasn't looking for my stupid dog and to back off as she was pregnant. My fiancé told me to calm down and we'd look for the dog. I told him no, I would look for my dog, and when I got back his daughter better be gone, and if he has issues he could go too, because I was sick of dealing with his little beach of daughter who everyone including her own parents and boyfriend avoids. I didn't wait for them to respond. I did hear her crying though. Luckily, I found my dog. He was hiding in some bushes and has marks from the water on his back. When I arrived home they were both in the living room. My fiancé said he wanted to talk, but first he said I owed Kim an apology. I told him F himself and she better start packing. My fiancé refused to talk to me. I then decided to break it off with him after Kim left to stay at her boyfriend's.
My stepmother has a problem with the fact I use religion as a way to cope with my bio mom's abuse. When I was around 11 years old, my parents divorced and my dad got custody. Mom changed after the divorce. Previously she was a crazy religious lunatic. My older brother and I were raised Catholic due to our mom, but my dad was an atheist who never cared about that stuff. A little while later, my brother and I became outspoken atheists, partly to defy our mom, but my brother was really just finding himself, and I followed his lead. After the divorce, Dad quickly remarried, and I nicknamed his new wife the Witch because she was rude and had an elitist attitude, as well as a huge bumpy nose with a mole near one of the nostrils. Dad loved us but changed because of her. She influenced him and he started acting differently. I suffered from night terrors in middle school when going through puberty, but my stepmother suggested medication and therapy, which didn't help. I later realized that I had trauma from my mom's abuse and her encouragement of my brother to hurt himself. During my sophomore year in high school, I found my communion cross and hung it on my wall. This brought me comfort and helped me sleep well for the first time in years. It was a reminder of better times when we had a complete family, even if I was abused. I started spending time at the local church because I felt safe around Catholic symbols. I joined the congregation and even began an apprenticeship with a blacksmith who attended the church. By the start of my junior year, I had a religious transformation and became a born-again Catholic, wearing a cross I forged myself every day. My dad and stepmother seemed supportive when my stepmother wasn't around. However, she had issues with me displaying my faith, including wearing my cross when guests were over. She laid hands on me over this multiple times. She also stopped showing off my room to guests after I decorated it with religious items. At 18, I enlisted in the Marines and served for 5 years. After returning home, I moved back into my old room and planned to attend college, sharing an apartment with my brother. My stepmother introduced me to a girl from her friend's family. We went on 2 dates, and although we didn't connect strongly, I continued seeing her. The trouble began when we couldn't schedule a third date because I had church commitments and volunteer work on Sunday mornings. The girl seemed uncomfortable with my religious beliefs and stopped texting me purely because of this. A day later, my stepmother and the girl's mother discussed the canceled date, and my stepmother expressed annoyance at my continued religious commitment. The girl visited my room later and criticized me for not being flexible with my plans. She suggested that I cancel my church activities to take her out. This left me confused as I had been ghosted, and I never acted vindictively. She claimed that I believed my church allowed men to mistreat women, which was not true. I left the room during the argument because she was impossible to reason with, and I didn't want things to escalate. I learned this during an incident on Christmas Eve when I was kicked out and left in the cold at the age of 14. My dad remained silent about the whole situation. I wasn't too concerned about the girl I had been set up with, as I was more interested in asking out a childhood friend. I respected my family's atheism, and I believe everyone has the right to their own beliefs. The rest of my family either supports the girl or avoids getting involved. My step-aunt sent me atheist articles and other materials trying to challenge my faith. I am the only one in my family who is not an outspoken atheist. I don't want to cut off contact with my family because I love my dad, even though they come as a package deal. My brother is the only one who supports me and is actively looking for apartments to help us move out. I'm not very hopeful that my family will accept my faith, but I won't compromise my beliefs just because my step-family disapproves. What is the craziest success story you have heard? I went to a big West Coast school and graduated. My sophomore year a kid moves into the frat house as a freshman. We'll call him Walter. Basically, after his first semester in college, he flunked out with straight Fs. He couldn't bear to tell his parents, so what he did was he borrowed some friends' report cards and cut and pasted A's and B's on the report card template with his name on it, covering up the F's. He then copied that and sent it to his parents. For tuition, his parents would send checks made out to him to pay it with, and with those checks Walter would put it into his technology business. Walter continued cutting and pasting for 4 years with different classes copied from different friends' report cards. At the end of 4 years when he was supposed to graduate he borrowed a cap and gown and told his parents that he just wanted to do the big ceremony in the stadium, not at the business school where he supposedly graduated from, and they hand out your diploma and call your name, etc. He just sat with his buddies in the stadium while his proud family watched. He posed for pictures with his folks and his grandparents. Walter's business then exploded, and he became a multimillionaire. He decided he wanted to live a very peaceful life, and moved back home and went on living his life as a college graduate. Walter is now still a successful guy with kids, family, a huge mansion, and more. And nobody has ever ratted him out. He only told his parents on his 50th birthday, and they absolutely flipped out for a bit, but then they seemed to be fine with it. I haven't contacted him much recently, but I always tell this story because it is one of the most clever things I have seen a human do. My brother to do take backs on my fiancé who is also his ex. My brother proposed to my fiancé, his ex, and I'm pissed. My 28 brother, Mark, 26, used to date my fiancé, Jen, 26, A year ago. For context, they dated back in August 2022. They were only together for a month before he broke things off with her because he was bored of being in a relationship and never really wanted to settle down anyway. At the time they were dating I was in a different state, so I had no idea he even had a girlfriend, and I had no idea who Jen was until I met her. Jen and I met at a bar when I moved back in October and hit it off really well. She was easily the most beautiful and intelligent woman I ever met, and we met up a few times more before we made it official. Fast forward to December and I finally bring her up to my family and propose meeting her at Christmas. They knew I was in a relationship, but I'm not the most open about my personal life, so I kept details about her to a minimum until I knew how serious we really were. My parents asked to see pictures and they started passing my phone around the dinner table. Mark saw it and blew up, calling me a crap brother for dating his ex-girlfriend, and he demanded I break it off with her. I refused. When I asked Jen about it, she confirmed they dated and gave me the details about their breakup. It took a few weeks, but eventually Mark stopped bringing up me dating his ex and I thought he was over it. On Jen's birthday this year, I took her out to a fancy dinner with both of our families and her closest friends, and I asked her to marry me. Mark flipped once again and blew up about me proposing to her, which I and my sisters immediately shut down. The incident happened this past weekend. Mark had been pretty quiet about the whole thing for the last 2 months. I didn't see him much and figured he went low contact with me, which I had no problem with. Then he invited me and Jen for family dinner at his apartment with my parents and sisters. I thought it was weird, but my parents and sisters were also going, so we agreed to go. The dinner was nice, nothing too fancy, and we moved to the living room to talk. About 30 minutes into normal conversation, Mark stood up and told us he had an announcement. He made a long speech about being happy to have his family around for his big moment, then got on one knee and pulled out this cheap ring while asking Jen to marry him. Jen was confused and obviously uncomfortable and demanded that he put it away and stand up. My dad tried to make a grab for Mark, but I got to him first and punched him. I won't repeat most of it, mostly because I was too angry to even listen most of it, but he said something along the lines of wanting to show me that Jen wasn't really into me and just wanted to get back at him. Before it could get worse, my parents rushed me out and promised to talk to him. It's been a few days since it happened and I'm still pissed off. I don't know what to do at this point. I'm scared Jen might have second thoughts marrying me because of this. Any advice? My brother to do take backs on my fiancée, who is also his ex. I called Mark and asked him to meet up with me at my place to talk. I told him I would prefer Jen to be around for the talk as well, but I was cool with it if he didn't want her there. He agreed to talk to both of us and showed up at my place around noon today. It was pretty quiet for a few minutes before I started the conversation. I apologized for not warning him I would be proposing to Jen, and I apologized for hitting him. He said it was whatever, but he appreciated the apology. I told him what Jen had said about the relationship and breakup when I asked her about it, and I asked him to confirm if it was true. I pretty much said that his reaction throughout his whole thing has been extreme, and I wanted to make sure I wasn't misunderstanding their relationship or downplaying how serious they were. He confirmed that they only dated for a few weeks and he broke up with her because he lost interest. Jen asked if he was acting like this because he still had feelings or regrets about ending things with her. He said he could admit he thought she was more attractive than when he last saw her, but there weren't any feelings or regrets. He said he just didn't like seeing a girl he dated, even if it was short term, with his older brother, and as a man I shouldn't have violated him by pursuing things with his ex. I reminded him that I had no idea they dated, so it wasn't like I consciously did this knowing their history together. He shrugged me off and said it didn't matter, I still should have broken it off. He was adamant that if the roles were reversed he would have done the same thing, which I doubt. I asked him why he proposed to her if he didn't have any lingering feelings. Basically, to sum it up, he was talking about it to one of his buddies who was around when Mark and Jen dated, and the guy put the idea in his head that maybe Jen knew from the start that we were related and was doing this to get back at him, considering Jen had been hung up on him after they ended. He and his friend thought it would be a good idea to test it and see if they were right, so he came up with the idea to propose and see if she dumped me for him. Jen asked him to elaborate on why he thought she was hung up on him, and he told her that he heard she was asking about him following the breakup and still hanging out at the places they used to go to, so it was a valid assumption. Then for her to pop up randomly with his brother affirmed his suspicions. Jen told him she'd only asked about him once following the breakup, and she'd been hanging out at those places with friends before they started dating, and she wouldn't avoid them because of a breakup. She also told him she was offended at the idea that she would go as low as to pursue me, just to get back at him. He shrugged and gave her a half-done apology, but said she had to see it from his point of view. He asked her if she really didn't know, and she told him that she didn't see the resemblance in us until we were in the same room and we act nothing alike, so it never crossed her mind, and he said okay. That pretty much wrapped up the conversation. He did tell me before he left that I could take back his invite to the wedding because he can't bring himself to support our relationship knowing he used to date her. I told him he didn't have to worry about that as he was most likely going to be uninvited anyway. It's been a few hours since our talk and I do feel better. My parents aren't too happy about him being uninvited, but they understood that it was a mutual decision and probably for the best. My sisters told me they knew he didn't have a good reason for being a jerk, and they don't blame me for not wanting him at the wedding. As of now, I'm going to limit contact with Mark, and I doubt he'll reach out to me anytime soon either.
Today my boyfriend asked me to sleep with his best friend. He asked me to look him in the eye and tell him I loved him while his homeboy Gregory would be in my guts. My boyfriend Henry, 21, has a very anxious attachment style, and it's come with a lot of perks. Oftentimes we'll go out and he'll have me ask for a guy's number and whatnot, all so that he knows he has to keep doing better because I'll always have options. Things haven't always been like that. It was only till we got to college our freshman years did Henry realize that.
You're going to want to find better like everyone else, but I'll just make sure I'm the best.
But honestly, I never wanted any other options in the first place, I love Henry the first always have, but 2 days ago he crossed the line. I was used to him begging me to look for better or to cheat on him occasionally, but I always said no. It got to the point where I dropped to my knees crying on his shirt pleading him to stop asking me that. He looked at me and eventually agreed, but only on one condition. He wanted me to get wicked with his best friend Gregory. Listen, I'd be lying if I said I didn't find Gregory attractive. He's tall, nicely shaven, constantly smells like vanilla, has smooth dark skin, and word to my mom, one of the most relaxed voices you'd ever hear. I know how this sounds, like I want Gregory, but I don't know, would it be such a bad thing? Henry wanted me to make love to Gregory in front of him so he could see how much better he could be treating me and that I would always hold this expectation over his head. Yesterday morning I realized that I was getting sick of Henry's competitive nonsense. Rather than focusing on himself, he thrived in comparison. I was gonna clap back hard on Gregory in front of Henry's eyes and make sure he nuts all over my teeth. So that's exactly what I did last night. Things went according to plan. Henry sat down his chair and I took a hit of a little za and I let Gregory throw me around the room. Henry actually couldn't believe his eyes. At one point he told me,
"Savannah, please, I know you can hear me, I saw all I needed to see, just stop."
I looked at him dead in the eye while I handled Gregory's meat in my hand. I slowly mouthed, "We're done." As Gregory finished on my face and accidentally shot some on Henry's left eye.
My lesbian ex cheated on me and got pregnant and claims it's mine. 7 years ago I was married to my dear ex. We were together for 6 years at this point. I thought we had a great relationship. A year prior I received a nice inheritance. I used the money first to buy a condo for us to live, a new car for her because hers was falling apart as a thank you for her constant support over the years, and the rest went to starting my own company. I thought we loved each other, we had talked endless times about kids, we both wanted a family. One day when I came home from work, she was seated on the couch and signaled for me to sit with her. Then she told me she was pregnant. I was happy for like half a millisecond. I always wanted kids, but when I realized about the impossibility of this happening because we were both cis women, I started to cry for what it meant. Then she started to cry and say sorry, but that this could be a good thing now. Incredibly, I asked how on earth could this be a good thing. She said that this could be the perfect opportunity for us to have the family we always wanted. I didn't have the energy to argue at that moment, so I packed some things and told her I was going to be staying with my cousin for a few days and come back to talk. I was a complete disaster with my cousin for a week, then I returned, said I wanted a divorce, packed all the rest of my things while she tells me that she can't do it without me and that I'm abandoning our child. I said nothing, I couldn't speak, I didn't have it in me to do anything but pack and leave. In the divorce I let her have the condo, her car, it was on my name, she demanded alimony, I gave it to her for a year even though she wasn't really entitled to it, she demanded child support but was denied for obvious reasons. A year later it was done. A month before the divorce was finalized, I met a woman. I wasn't sure about dating but my friends encouraged me to get back out there, so I did. It was slow. I told her about my past, she felt really bad for me. We went on dates, we kissed, then she stopped responding to my texts and calls for a week. I didn't know what was happening. She then showed up at my home looking sad. She tells me she's pregnant, to which I think not again. But she quickly explains that she found out a few days ago, she had an appointment that day and was told she was about 16 weeks along, that she did not cheat since we had known each other for 3 months, that she knows this might be somehow triggering for me, that she really likes me but understands if I want nothing to do with her and left. Ultimately I couldn't let her go, and we stayed together. The whole ordeal was a bit confusing at first but we worked it out. Now my company is on the rise and it's been for years. We bought a house, got married, had 2 more kids, a dog and a cat, her family loves me, my family loves her. But then last Saturday my ex had to appear again. We are in a family gathering on my wife's side. When she showed up to wife's aunt's house to expose me as a horrible person who abandoned her wife and child and left them with nothing to go start a new family with a disgusting girl and raise someone else's child, and that since I have money I have to start paying the overdue child support and blah blah blah. Apparently she befriended my wife's cousin's wife in PTA, told her about me, she gave my name and my wife's cousin's wife was shocked and appalled by my actions and decided they were going to confront me in the family gathering for everyone to hear and show them the evidence. Me and my wife were inside with one of her sisters getting snacks for the kids, when we heard a commotion outside and went to see what was happening, and there she was halfway through her story showing the OI document stating I was part of the process, hence responsible for the child, but if it has my name on it it's fake. I didn't get to actually read it. I think that's why they believed her so quickly. My wife tried to argue back but was cut by her aunt cousin's mom, and in not a very nice way kicked us out with a promise to take my treatment of my ex public and ruin my company. My husband is attracted to my daughter. TLDR, I made my daughter leave after finding out my husband is attracted to her. I, 55, have been married to my husband and my daughter's stepdad, 63, for 4 years. My 23-year-old daughter and I have a complicated relationship. She has been diagnosed with dissociative identity disorder. She has a lot of trauma from watching me and my husband's horrible marriage go down and was bullied in school. When she told me she was being bullied by peers, my view that all children are innocent really tied my hands because I told her that if I said anything to them, I would be an adult harassing a child. She has blamed me for that ever since. And keeps referring to this one time where the kids at school called her trash due to the fact that she wasn't taking care of her hygiene due to depression. Part, not all, of my response was telling her to take a shower and I bought her new clothes. The bullying finally ended with an expulsion and a suspension for the ringleaders. She still throws the fact that a school clinic volunteer told her that if she was their kid she'd have permission to punch back if administrators didn't do anything. I thought that having her live with me while she finishes school and gets a job would help heal some childhood wounds of my second husband, and I modeled a healthy relationship. However, my daughter now doesn't get along with my husband. She is a very introverted, creative person who likes immersing herself in escapism. So she'd get annoyed if she was sitting eating alone and my husband would sit across from her and eat, saying she ate later so she could eat alone. However, my husband started acting distant from me and my daughter complained that his eyes lingered for too long. She got very angry and there was a lot of shouting and slamming of doors. Finally my husband admitted he's attracted to her and it's hard to be around her all day. Said she was walking temptation and said that's why he was avoiding sex with me. I was so upset to hear this. I don't blame my daughter for this, but at the same time the situation has become unbearable. Something would have to give, and I couldn't collect my thoughts with both of them still being in the house. So I gave my daughter money to stay at an extended stay hotel and asked her to utilize her college's emergency financial and housing resources they have for students in need. She responded by storming out and telling my ex, who is now circling social media using it to paint me as the villain of all villains. I'm not abandoning my daughter. She qualifies for those resources anyway since my ex is unemployed and we are in substantial debt. I just need time to process the situation and don't want to leave my house to stay with my daughter when I have a marriage to figure out whether or not to save.
I don't know if I'm depressed. Everything has fallen apart. All my friends have left me. I speak to 2 people, one of which I've never even met, Earl. I don't eat. The thought of my future gives me panic attacks and the past is full of regrettable memories that are scarred into my brain. The thought of death doesn't scare me anymore. I'm not suicidal, but if I was to die I don't think I'd be fazed by it. I feel as if everyone has left me. I'm alone. I don't want to kill myself, but I don't want to be here anymore. I am in pain. If I told my parents about the way I'm feeling, they would tell me you have a roof over your head and food in your belly. What do you have to be sad about? And that's true. There isn't a lot I can say back to that. They ask me what I have to be sad about, and the thing is I don't even know. I don't feel as if I have a problem big enough to talk about. I drink to feel better, and when I drink I sh. I don't feel like I can tell people about my feelings without feeling like I'm a burden, a Debbie Downer if you will. I don't want to scare the few people I have left away. Everything is falling apart, and there is nothing I can do but distract myself with music. I don't know why I feel the way I do. I have no more friends, sure. Every day feels the same maybe, but I don't have anything to be depressed about, and yet I wake up every day feeling shittier than the one before. I don't know what's wrong with me.
Treat me like a maid and threaten me? I'll just make you homeless. So I've known my old flatmate F for several years, and we had a good friendship up until a year ago. I was a hormonal young woman that wanted to have her own space, and F felt the same, so we put our money together and rented a flat. But when I say our money, I mean 70% mine and 30% hers. I didn't have a problem with it at first because I was just glad to not have my mom in my ear 24/7. I even paid for all the furniture in the flat, just for everything to be broken, ripped, or messed up with food and cigarette butts. That comes later. I had BF stay with me in my room, and it was amazing, and F had the spawn of Satan's play toy FB stay with her. Now BF and I live in our own flat in a different city because crap hit the fan in more ways than one. Now I don't have a friend, but I'm better off that way because that was no friend. I'm the beginning, and F opened a joint account for bills and kept our separate accounts so bills didn't fall on one person, which I came to find a few months later that when I got paid, end of the month, F took money from the account until their payday, which was on a set date every month. This led to unpaid bills and calls coming through to me from companies chasing for money. When I confronted F about it, they said they needed to travel, but I knew it was going to drugs for F and FB. They did some weird crap. I know I should have known better and nipped IT in the bud there and then, but no. F even begged me for money after taking money out of the account every month, and me being me lent it to her. F paid nothing towards food shopping, but F and FB ate every last thing. If money wasn't an issue, cleanliness was. Plates, cups, and pots were left all over the kitchen, and I was made expected to clean everything, which I did because I have OCD and can't stand mess. If you saw it, you'd understand. When I finally put my foot down, F told me that BF left plates on the side too. BF laughed and told F that his plates were on the side overnight, hers were there for 6 days. F still took the piss and never cleaned up unless I said anything like I was her mother. After that, FB waited until BF left the flat to go to the shop and shouted at me, telling me to sort myself out before he did, blah 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 empty threats. FB didn't realize I was on the phone with BF, and BF came back to the flat. Before he got through the door, FB ran out, slamming my door and calling me a jerk while running away like a coward because he's scared of BF. That's actually true, but it's too long to add. Bear in mind BF is like the BFG. One day F and FB went away without a word, and F had taken things from my room, my hair straightener, my jumper, and my brush, so I went into their room to retrieve them. The smell that hit my nose when I opened the door made me so angry I don't know why, but immediately I got on the phone with the landlord. This is the revenge part. The landlord came over the next day while F and FB were still out and saw the state that F left the flat in. He was so livid he swore and apologized to me. He was sweet, but said he wanted to issue her a notice to leave the flat and gave me permission to stay. Although I was thankful for his generous offer, I didn't want to stay where I felt such bad energy. Before he issued the notice, I called BF and asked him to arrange a removal van while I contacted a storage company to rent a locker. I then dismantled and packed the furniture from the kitchen, bathroom, and living room, packed up the van, and kept my things safe. God knows F would have stolen them. When F and FB got back, F saw the notice and furniture gone. She got so mad she stormed out. The notice had mentioned that the cleanliness of the flat was disgusting, the loud music had been reported by neighbors, they had a boombox playing at antisocial hours, and smoking in the flat was not allowed, which F knew before signing the agreement. F never spoke a word to me after the notice was served and left the flat before the 2 months was up. The dummies left her bedroom windows open and tried to sneak in later that evening, but I shut them and made sure they were locked with the key. The door key was changed by the landlord immediately after F and FB left. Me and BF stayed about a month later to make sure the flat was presentable to new tenants before we moved on. We now live in a much nicer area and are trying for our first baby. Wish us luck. Oh, also, F and FB broke up, I heard through the grapevine. F burned every last bridge with her family and even called BF for money. Thankfully, he didn't help her. We haven't heard a word from her since, and I couldn't be happier to be rid of that leech. What did you do as a child that you hid from your parents? I mixed chemicals to make explosives. Once, at a physics department meeting, I asked the other professors, how many of you made gunpowder when you were a kid? About 2/3 raised their hands. I found chemistry to be pretty boring, except for explosives. In New York City in the 1950s there was even a store that specialized in selling dangerous chemicals to youngsters. It was called Win Chemical. If you were under 13 you needed an adult to come with you. I recall waiting in line behind a young kid and his grandmother. When they got to the front he asked for 1 ounce of potassium nitrate, 1 ounce of powdered charcoal, and 1 ounce of sulfur. Those are the 3 ingredients in classical gunpowder, although the ratios are not 1:1:1. The sales clerk asked if the grandmother approved, and she did. He didn't say a word about what the kid was obviously going to make, and neither did I. I doubt very much if the grandmother knew. At home, I would sit at my desk with a homemade scale. I used coins as weights, and mix the ingredients. Then I would put them on a piece of cardboard, attach a short fuse. Those could also be bought at Win. Open the window, put it all on the sill, light the fuse, and close the window. Then I would watch the flash and smoke and see how cleanly it all burned. One day, after I had been doing this, my mom came into the room. She said that a policeman had seen some smoke from my window. I was on the 3rd floor of an apartment house, across the street from St. Mary's Park, and was investigating. I knew I was dead. He came into my room and asked what I was doing. I told him I was doing chemistry experiments. He looked at me, and at my desk, and said, "Oh," and then turned and left. I realized that what he thought he had seen was not an out-of-control teenager, but a boy genius, a young scientist, one of those types he had read about in the newspapers or seen depicted on TV. I knew better. I was just making gunpowder and other explosives, but I fit into a stereotype that was beyond his ken, and he seemed to be the one who was embarrassed. Through some miracle, I had survived the encounter. I was highly amused at the way I had survived. My mom seemed happy enough too. If the police, presumed to be experts, were satisfied, so was she. In high school, I had a friend who had an unhappy story. He was badly burned by an explosive experiment gone wrong, and his parents took away all his chemicals. My best friend thought that shoving her breast down my daughter's throat to calm her down was completely okay. Basically what the title says. I have a daughter of 10 months. Me, 30F, and my best friend, 31F, have always been super close, and she helped a lot during my pregnancy and after childbirth. So it always came naturally to me to ask her for help, till she became some kind of nanny for my daughter when needed. She's always been very eager and happy to help. Since she has no children of her own, she had a miscarriage in the past and stopped trying afterwards. So we were at a mutual friend wedding yesterday, and I was holding my daughter for quite some time. Since she hates strollers, my best friend came to me and offered to take her for a while, so that I could take a break and go chat with some friends. I agreed and wholeheartedly thanked her. After 20 minutes or so, I come back to where we were, and she wasn't there. So I start looking for her in the garden, and she was literally nowhere to be found. Finally, after another 10 minutes I managed to find her, and I see her talking to some people while holding my baby with her boob shoved down my daughter's throat. I literally tried my best to keep my composure and not to scream, so I went to her and said that we needed to talk. After reaching a quiet place, I yelled WTF was wrong with her and why was she nursing my daughter. She looked at me in disbelief, and she replied that she understood that it was the best way to calm my daughter, and that there's nothing wrong about it, adding that she could very well be her daughter. WTF? I was shocked, but we couldn't keep up the conversation because we needed to get back inside for the wedding cake. I told her that we would have continued the discussion later on. We never did, but we agreed to meet today in a couple of hours. Honestly, I'm so f-kin mad. WTF? Why did she had to do it? I don't even f-kin know what to tell her without raging at her. It's been nearly a day and this thought never left my mind, not even for a second. How could she say that theirs was nothing wrong with it? I feel like she violated my daughter, and she gave literally 0 F about it. I'm trying to arrange my thoughts before talking to her. I hope I don't end up hitting her. I'm nearly bursting out. So we met and we talked. I let her talk first. She explained that my daughter was restless while she was talking to a couple of women, and they said that maybe she was hungry and it was fine for them to keep talking while she was breastfeeding. So she just did. WTF. I went straight to the point. What she did was completely f-ket up. No excuses. She told me that she didn't agree and that she did nothing wrong. She said that she tried everything in the past and nothing worked except for her breasts, which were the only things that calmed her down. So she just did what she always had done. I literally couldn't believe it. I asked her what was wrong with her for doing such a thing behind my back and why the FCK among all things she thought that she could dry nurse my daughter. She replied back saying that she was just doing what she thought was best for the baby and doing what my daughter wanted, adding that she didn't think she needed to inform me of such thing, since she's quite a second mother to her. I was losing it, but she continued. She added that she wasn't dry nursing her, since a while ago after using pumps and dry nursing her she started to lactate a little, saying that the supply was still low but that in a while I could leave breastfeeding to her and stop doing it and worrying about it. I was livid, but she didn't even realize. She was completely clueless, like absorbed in her own world, like not even realizing that what she did was wrong. So I stood up from the table and told her that she was completely insane and that she was creeping me out. I told her that she wasn't allowed near my daughter anymore and to never contact me again, or I would report everything to the police. She started crying, saying that I couldn't cut her off from our daughter's life, so I lost it and shouted at her that it's not her goddamn baby, but it was me who popped her out. It was me who was pregnant for 9 months and she was my daughter, and not hers, and left. I'm just completely shocked. I don't even think shocked can completely describe what I'm feeling now. I received a couple of texts from her begging to reconsider it and asking to see my daughter. I told her to stop contacting me, and blocked her. If I receive another message or call or anything like that, I will report everything to the police. I'm just disgusted. She was my best friend. Why did she do something like this? I'm completely speechless. My girlfriend first said she was pregnant, then a few days later, she told me she had an abortion. She did this all as a joke. English is not my first language, so bear with me here. I'm a 27-year-old male, and my girlfriend, 28, and I have been together for the past 2 years. It's my first serious relationship, and she's the only person I've truly loved, I mean really loved. I have 4 siblings and a mother. I like my siblings, but I do not love them, and I hate my mother because she was abusive, both physically and mentally. I've never been close to them, and I've always believed that being related by blood doesn't obligate you to love someone. However, I knew one thing: if I ever had kids, I would love them no matter what. Becoming a dad was my most important dream. Not just a father, but a daddy, a man who would do anything for his family, who would watch his kids take their first steps, hear their first words. I just wanted to be there for them, to see them, to listen to them. But now, I don't know if I still want it. My girlfriend told me she definitely wants to have kids in the future because it was her dream too, to become a mom and have a happy family. We like to play pranks on each other, but they were innocent jokes like doorway tape pranks or hiding a small plastic spider in a drawer. Everything happened this week. Last week was normal. There was no indication that my girlfriend was planning a prank. On Thursday, after I came back from work, she sat in our living room looking concerned. I immediately noticed and sat next to her to ask what happened. She then showed me a pregnancy test and said she was pregnant. I couldn't believe it. I was overjoyed. I hugged her tightly and kissed her. Although she still seemed concerned, I excitedly told her that we would be parents and that, although it's a big responsibility, we would manage together. She asked me not to tell anyone yet because she wanted to do it personally. I agreed, thinking she might tell her parents during our usual Sunday dinner at their house. I was the happiest man alive. I had been looking for an engagement ring, planning to propose, but now I decided to wait and buy a ring she deserved, to do it right. I was excited all day and wanted to spend all my time with her, but she wasn't in the mood. I thought it might be hormones, so I didn't push and assured her I was there if she needed anything. That night, as we went to bed and I hugged her, massaging her belly, I told her I loved her and we would make it through. Before we fell asleep, she mentioned needing to take a day off from work. I told her it was fine and to call me if she felt bad. I would come home from work early to be with her. The next day, I woke up before her and went to work as usual, leaving her a note that read, "You will be a perfect mother," to reassure her. I texted her a few times during work, but she didn't respond, which worried me. When I came home and she wasn't there, I called her several times without a response. I contacted her mother and sister, but they didn't know where she was either. After waiting a few hours and trying to call her many times, she finally returned home. I hugged her and asked if everything was fine, and she said, "Yes, now everything is fine." She said we needed to talk, so we sat down, and she began to say she was afraid of being pregnant and didn't think she could be a good mother. I interrupted her, insisting she would be great, citing how she cared for her niece. She said this was different, she wasn't ready to be a mother yet, and with a small smile, she said, "I had an abortion." I was shocked and asked her to repeat herself. When she did, my heart broke, and I started crying, asking, "Why? You said you wanted to be a mother." I fell to my knees, crying, reaching out to her stomach, asking, "Why?" I looked into her eyes and shouted, "How could you take my baby?" She regretted it but didn't answer. I screamed, "Why did you take my baby?" Then she started crying, saying it was all a prank. I cried even harder, asking if she was still pregnant, but she denied it, saying she had never been pregnant, and it was supposed to be a joke. She hugged me, apologizing, saying she didn't think I would react like this. After a few minutes, I asked her why she thought it would be funny, but she couldn't answer. I pushed her away and walked out, saying I needed to be alone. She tried to stop me, but I told her to leave me alone and drove off. I stopped at a parking lot about 40 kilometers from where I live. My phone was ringing constantly. I knew it was my girlfriend, but I didn't want to talk, so I turned on airplane mode. I lay down in the car seat and fell asleep. The next day, I woke up cold and went to work. A friend noticed I was upset, but I just said I had a bad night. After work, I cried again on the drive home and decided to sleep in my car, not wanting to be a burden to anyone. My phone was dead, so I lay there all day, thinking about what happened. I couldn't imagine myself as a dad anymore. Every time I tried, I cried. My heart was shattered, and I didn't know what to do. Today, Monday, I've decided to go home and talk with my girlfriend. I'll update in the next few days. I don't know what to say to her or how I'll react when I see her. But one thing is clear, she's lost my trust because she knew how much being a dad meant to me, and I don't know if I can forgive her.
Update: my parents decided to reach out after ghosting me for 5 years. I asked to talk yesterday. We were on Zoom within an hour. It was my parents and me and my husband. They asked to see the kids. I said they could see them eventually, depending on them earning our trust and convincing us they would be positive additions to the kids' lives. My parents asked me to start by reading a letter they claimed to have written on my wedding day. It said they were uncomfortable with me marrying my former boss if they thought he took advantage of me, so they left between the wedding and reception to avoid a scene. However, they wanted me to know they were here for me despite their issues with him. They said they would have sent this to me the morning after my wedding. Still, I sent my email about them needing to respect my choices, and they were so ashamed they couldn't bring themselves to send theirs. Seeing my anniversary post made them realize how much they've missed in 5 years, and they really don't want to miss anymore. I had some questions, like what the big deal was with me marrying my former boss, and they said that it just wasn't what they had in mind for my wedding day and my future spouse. I asked why they even came to the wedding if they didn't support the marriage, and my dad responded that he wanted to walk his daughter down the aisle as it was the only chance he'd get. The way it was phrased implied that they had intentionally only come to the wedding so he could give me away and always planned to leave halfway. Because he said my daughter and didn't talk to me directly, it was pretty clear he was thinking about my older sister, who passed away. My husband caught that, too, and said that if they were talking about me, they should address me directly, then added that if they had planned to leave, they should have told us as we wouldn't have invited them. The fact they waited 5 years to reach out would take more reasons than shame as a father, he didn't understand how they could ignore their daughter for years, or only get back in touch when we had kids. My dad snapped that he wouldn't take this from a kushi, a slur meaning dark-skinned. My mother immediately tried to run damage control, but I ended the call. They have since messaged me several times, trying to explain that calling my husband a racial slur didn't indicate a racist attitude. He wouldn't have said that in front of the kids, so they should still get to meet them. I've spent 5 years wondering how they were so offended by me marrying my boss that had earned no contact for half a decade. Turns out they're just racist. It's almost nice to find out. If it were just the boss thing, I would sympathize with them. We might even be able to reconcile, but with this, it's now just a question of whether I will knowingly expose my mixed-race children to a couple of racists, which I will obviously not do. My husband suggested polyamory a few years ago, and I love it. We're 5 years into our marriage with 3-year-old twin girls. After the girls were born, he pushed for a polygamous relationship, and at first I was against it. He kept pushing, and I finally said yes. At first, when he would be out with someone else, I would cry. I debated divorce for a while. After I cried and processed everything, I realized how over him I was. I also realized that leaving him would put me in an awful position, and the girls would have to live their whole lives moving houses every other weeks. Then while I was deciding what to do, I realized the perks. He works full-time, and I do part-time, teaching a few yoga classes in the morning. I get great insurance through his work, a great place to live, and barely pay any bills. He worked from home most of the days, but I convinced him slowly into going into the office after I get home from my morning yoga classes, around 9 a.m. I then pushed him to go out on more dates, and I would do whatever I wanted with the twins. We go out on play dates with my mom friends, we see movies, go to parks, and do anything we want. He's almost always gone at this point on multiple dates with multiple women. I get to pick what I want to watch every night after the girls go to bed. I rarely have to clean up after him because he's gone all the time. I basically get all my bills paid for. I get a free place to live. If I want a night off, I just tell my husband I have a date and he takes care of the girls or takes them to his parents' place. I typically don't have a date. I just go shopping, eat at a place by myself, read a book at Starbucks. I'll even do girls' nights and get us hotel rooms so none of us have to Uber home. I've gone on a couple dates, but honestly, I don't really care to date. Our relationship is basically over, but I enjoy the perks of it now.
I was stabbed, and now my soon-to-be ex-husband wants to cancel the divorce. My soon-to-be ex-husband and I had been married for 12 years. We got married at 22. About 4 months ago, he asked me for a divorce after confessing to me that he was having an affair and that he was in love with his female best friend. I never liked her and have asked him to reduce the amount of time he spent with her, to stop going on one-on-one dinners with her, but he refused. At first I took it badly, and my husband actually asked to open the relationship so he could be with us both at the same time. It was when he asked me that I realized my marriage had died, and no amount of begging for him to change was ever going to make him take his actions back and love me again. I decided to start the divorce proceedings. However, his mother got sick at around that time. I had to take care of her at night since the lady is quite picky with other people. She always treated me badly and never welcomed me as the wife of her son, but I still took care of her. This delayed the divorce a bit, and in hindsight I guess they were using me as a nurse or babysitter. A month and a half ago I was walking to work. It was about 6 a.m. A man in an all-black outfit ran up to me and stabbed me. He did it 3 times. Once in my stomach, and twice in my arms. I didn't have much with me, just my cell phone and about $10. He robbed the phone and $10. The area was secluded, but I had the strength to yell for help, and luckily a random man came across me. He gave me his phone and called the ambulance and my husband. I wanted my husband with me, regardless of anything. It's been a while and I'm now better. My husband now doesn't want a divorce. He says that this altercation opened his eyes and that he really can't imagine a life without me. It was going to be an uncontested divorce since this type of divorce is totally free in my country and I'm stingy enough to not want to pay a lawyer's fees, but now he doesn't want a divorce. I'm living with my mother and my soon-to-be ex-husband comes over every day to screw up my existence. What do I do? I'm considering divorcing my wife because she can't get over her mom dying. Yeah, I know everyone is fired up at the title and ready to tell me what a jerk I am, so here we go. My 36 male wife's 33 female mother passed away 5 years ago from lung cancer. It was not a peaceful or easy death. Our lives understandably went on pause after the diagnosis, and we both spent a lot of time off work helping care for her mother. My wife had a pretty typical showing of grief at the time, cycling through different stages. Same with our 3 kids. After she passed, however, my wife got really bad. I totally understand this. I can't say I know exactly what she went through because I haven't had a parent die, but I understand how devastated she was. 4 months after her mom passed, she could barely function. I gently took over pretty much all the responsibilities in the household, then with the kids. She had been attending grief counseling since the diagnosis and continued after the death. None of this is the problem. I endeavor to be as supportive as possible. She cried on my shoulder every night for months, and I just thought this was the worst of. For better or worse, the problem is that after 5 years, she does not seem any better or more functional. She stopped grief counseling about 4 years ago and refused to go again, stating it would not help her and that nothing could. About a month before any major holiday, she will have a major downturn. In bed half the day, crying all day. Does not want to interact with the family. Does not have the energy to do anything around the house. This will go on every single day until about a week after the holiday ends. Every holiday is intense grief, just as much now as it was 5 years ago. October, November, December, and January, her mom's birthday month every year, are particularly bad. I am essentially without my wife, and I'm a single parent to my 3 kids. Altogether, she is completely incapacitated by grief for about 6 months out of the year, and has been this way the past 5 years. When I say incapacitated, I mean incapacitated when she is in the depths of her grief. She is completely incapable of intimacy with me or the kids. There is no cuddling, spending time with us, going on family outings. I don't make love for half the year. I've stopped asking her if she wants to talk about it, because she can't get any words out between sobs if she tries. What hurts the most is that the kids have stopped asking or being concerned. If they see their mom in bed when they get home, they just go about their day and might casually mention, "Oh, mom is sad today." If they're siblings or I ask where she is, they don't really seek affection with her anymore because they rarely get anything more than tears. I've discussed this with therapists, my parents, friends, etc., and I know all the rebuttals people have for this, so let me preempt them. She is unwilling to go back to therapy, for grief counseling or to see a doctor for depression. Yes, I know she's severely depressed. I can't force her to go to the doctor. I've tried so much. Yes, it really is just as intense as it was 5 years ago. No, I never tell her to get over it or blow her off. On my worst days, I just give space and leave her be. Most days I try to offer her some comfort. If you want to judge me for leaving her alone, whatever. But know that I feel like I essentially have caretaker fatigue at this point. No, she does not have a history of depression, but she does have ADHD. Don't know if that's relevant. I feel like my wife died when her mom died. I would do anything to get her back, even a small piece of her, but she doesn't seem willing or able to move on past her mom's death. I feel awful for considering a divorce, but I don't know what else to do. I reconnected with my family after having no contact for years, but I was not prepared when they welcomed me with wrapped garbage on Christmas Eve, so I took all my gifts for them. My family has been pranksters and, at times, entitled my whole life. But on Christmas Eve, they took the cake. I had no contact with them for years, but they convinced me to reconnect after I moved closer, because this will be the first time I will see them after no contact. I got them good gifts like tablets for the kids with built-in DVD players, sports memorabilia and camping stuff for my dad, brother, and uncle. Specific antiques, jewelry, and appliances for my mom, Sil, and aunt. I brought my girlfriend and was delighted to spend Christmas Eve with my family. Everything was going smoothly. And I warned my family, no pranks on me or my girlfriend, at all. They swore none would happen. But they could not resist. We got attacked by a silly string from multiple fronts. That stuff reeks and gets everywhere. Somehow, we powered through that. But then came the gifts. I wasn't expecting much. But none of them even tried. I got dollar store cooking utensils, a pair of insanely ugly holiday socks that I confirmed were also dollar store, and a pink hat, and that was just for my parents. They all kept snickering and recording me as I unwrapped random junk. One is a used mirror of a car I no longer own. And the one gift there to my girlfriend was a bottle of fart spray. I told them I'd had enough, and they'd agreed to no pranks. Long story short, they weren't just gag gifts. They were the only presents there for us. I had enough and just started gathering all the presents I'd brought. They all freaked out and demanded I give them back. I told them all that they didn't change one bit, and they could kiss all of that stuff goodbye. We bagged everything and stormed out. The family kept calling and messaging me that I was greedy, I couldn't take a joke or think of anything to get me, and the kids were crying. They went off about thinking I was a brat who couldn't take a joke. Then they tried to say I didn't tell the truth. I asked them to tell me what and it was a lie. They tried gaslighting, but I wasn't having it. My mother resorted to crocodile tears and guilt, but I called her and my father out as self-serving narcissists who played favorites and would rather make me the bad guy so they wouldn't have to feel bad about themselves. I hung up on them. They tried calling back again and again. But I refused to pick up and deleted all of their voicemails. But I kept the texts just in case I'd need to go to a lawyer. More people in the extended family were made aware of what happened. Initially, some sided with my parents and brother, but quickly switched sides. My parents then tried to turn my brother into the new scapegoat for the situation since it couldn't be me, and then it turned into a chicken fight. After about 2 weeks, my parents showed up at my door to get me to talk to them. But I refused. I found out later that other relatives called them children, and they owed me a lifetime of apologies. My brother doubled down that what they did was funny and refused to admit wrongdoing, but his wife and even his kids were furious at him. The rest of the family made him delete the videos he recorded of me at Christmas, and he blamed me for it because I ruined his best prank yet. My sister-in-law ended up slapping him and calling him a man-child, then saying she'd never been so humiliated to be his wife. She was unaware of what my family put me through growing up until the Christmas prank because I'd hardly seen her before cutting contact with my family. Then she gave him an ultimatum: marriage counseling and a sincere apology to me, or she would leave him. My brother stubbornly refused. His wife took the kids and left for a few days. He then came to my house while intoxicated and yelling that it was all my fault and that I was a BTCH baby who couldn't take a joke. He demanded I talk to his wife and fix things. I had to call our parents to get him before I had the police take him away. They showed up mortified and screaming at him to shut the hell up. After a few more days, my parents begged me to come over and speak to them. It took me a while to agree. And when I did, my brother was there with them looking like a kicked puppy. His wife had gone to get a consultation from a divorce lawyer, and my brother finally realized this was for real, and unless he acknowledged he was a massive a-hole, his life would be ruined. His wife did come back for the sake of keeping the kids in school. But even after months, my brother is still in the doghouse. My brother and parents apologized and admitted they never expected me to show up with such nice gifts, and figured I wasn't likely to bring anything since I hadn't seen them in years. They'd pranked me so much that it finally clicked with them why I'd previously gone no contact, and even though I showed up with real gifts, they went ahead with their plan anyway since the prank gifts were already under the tree, and they somehow thought I'd share in the humor. They thought wrong. I told them they would never apologize like this if they weren't being humiliated for their actions. To which they agreed and started trashing themselves. They just sat there looking at the floor while I ranted at them, and my mother was crying and blaming herself and my father. And my father started blaming her, and saying it all started with her. My brother for once in his life knew when to shut the hell up and accept fault. And when he finally did speak, he owned up to everything. Since it was too late to return the gifts to the store, the presents I took back were left in my garage, just sitting in a pile. I donated all of them to a local church for a charity rummage sale. Many chastised me for taking the gifts back from the kids too. But they were sharing in the delight of laughing at me that day, and now they have a lesson in consequences that it was good to have while still young. That said, my mother negated that by going rogue and buying the same tablet DVD combo players for the kids that I did. They no longer blame me for taking the gifts back because they understand how angry I was at Christmas. I had my birthday in March at a local pizza parlor, and my family were invited. It was their last chance. And shockingly, they did not blow it. They couldn't figure out what to get me, so they gifted me a large card with $100 cash in it and a "Will Do Better" apology written on the card. They also gave my girlfriend a set of sterling silver earrings, big apology as makeup for Christmas since she'd refused to see them in person till then. It hasn't been long enough since then for me to have details other than things that seem pleasantly normal now. No more pranks to me. Grandpa gave up what time he had left for revenge on my behalf. Now I've been debating over posting this or not, but have finally decided I will. This is my grandpa's nuclear revenge on my behalf. So I guess let's begin. It's going to be long. Sorry. I grew up dealing with a lot of mental health issues, as my mother is a drug addict and my father liked to ignore my existence as I'm the result of a one-night stand while he was married. So needless to say, his wife hated me and their children treated me horribly as well. The only good people I had in my life was my grandma and grandpa on my father's side. I loved them and spent a lot of time at my grandpa's business. He'll explain that a little later. Now at 14 everything went further downhill. I won't go into details, but my mother almost passed away and I met a man, let's name him Goat. He looked like one. Long story short, Goat was 25 at the beginning and emotionally, physically and sexually abused me. While I was under the pretense that I loved him and it was okay, he pushed me away from my grandparents and isolated me for 2 years until a friend helped me get out of it. During this next year, Goat stalked me, threatened me and had me absolutely terrified. I was afraid of going to the police as I didn't want to bring harsh light to my grandpa's business, and because I was afraid, I was staying at my friend's house for a while during this time, as my panic attacks and what I now know as PTSD was horrible and I hated to be alone. During this time my grandmother passed away, one of the only lights in my life left, so I became worse. I began drinking and going to parties and trying to forget my life. Right before my 18th birthday, Goat made a real-life appearance again. On my way back from a big party he jumped me, beat me black and blue and almost killed me. I was found and taken to hospital where they began treating me, and as I was underage they asked me to call an adult in my life that they could talk to. I tried to call my father but he didn't pick up. Knowing my mother wasn't going to help, I had to call my grandfather. He was at the hospital in lightning speed, and for the first time in my life I watched this man that had built his own empire really break down. Even at my grandma's funeral he didn't cry. I spent 2 months in hospital, with police questioning me and my grandpa by my side every day. During this time he met my friend who helped me out of it all at the beginning and became very close to him. My grandfather helped me get on my feet for a whole year, until one day he had a large family gathering and socialized the whole time, taking me with him. That night I will never forget. We went to get ice cream and then he just hugged me for a very long time. holding me tight and reassuring me everything would be okay. The next day my grandpa exacted his revenge. Now my grandpa was the owner of a well-off law firm that also had private detectives in a smaller office in his building. He apparently tracked down Goat and went about his revenge. My grandpa shot Goat 3 times in the stomach and once in the chest. Goat passed away in the hospital later that day while my grandpa was taken in and soon put in jail for manslaughter, which he pleaded guilty to. I never got the chance to visit my grandpa in jail as he passed away soon after in jail from complications. 1 week after my grandpa's death I got a call from his solicitor, and he asked me to go in. I was met with a lengthy letter from my grandpa, which was nothing but loving and showed that he had found out he had terminal lung cancer and wouldn't live much longer, but he couldn't happily leave me alone in this world without Goat being gone too. My grandpa left almost everything to me. At 20 I would inherit the law firm and could do as I pleased with it, and I inherited 95% of his savings, his house he lived in with grandma, and his other assets. In case anyone's interested, I turned 21 last week. I'm currently working at the law firm. My grandpa's secretary, now the CEO, has taken over the important things in the building and makes most of the decisions. I spent half the money I was given in locked saving funds for all of the younger family members to go to college when it's time. I cut all contact off with my father, who tried to steal money from me during the death arrangements of grandpa. My friend mentioned earlier in the story is now my fiancé, and we are getting married next summer. I'm still suffering from PTSD and depression, but it's getting better every day. I'm in therapy for my PTSD treatment. I got a tattoo for my grandpa and grandma on my back of 2 lions protecting a cub. I also opened up a safe house for anyone going through abuse of any kind. No matter the race, gender or age, I'm trying to help anyone I can in that situation. Besides, for what I've put away for later in life, I'm also thinking of opening up the bakery I always wanted and employing the people that need the job and help the most, but I'm unsure at the moment about that. My grandpa and grandma was a godsend, and to this day I miss them greatly, but I know I couldn't have changed the stubborn old man's mind even if I tried. My daughter betrayed me, so I exposed her at her wedding. My first daughter was getting married, and she needed me to be close to looking for her father for his blessings. Her dad was the one who left me in the labor room and ran off with another woman. I kept on looking for him, and on 2 occasions that I went to his house, I got chased away. I gave up and decided to raise her on my own, and soon after, I found my husband. He was a man I never had and a father my child needed, and he began to talk about how our lives would eventually be, how things might get better for my kid and me. For the past 20 years, he has just been the one my daughter and I needed. He has been there where no one else has been and has stayed true to his words to fend for us. But now my daughter is to be married, and she wants her real father to be present to give her away. I tried talking her out of it to explain the hurt and pain I have felt, that I need her to see reasons with me on why she shouldn't call her actual father. My daughter refused and said it was her real dad or no one. I told my husband, who was the financier, about it, and he got mad, but eventually, he agreed. I was surprised and thankful that he understood. On the day the in-laws were coming, she came in with 2 people, her deadbeat father and his wife. She declared on the table that she had 2 parents, and I have never been more disgusted. Her father and his wife began to discuss the wedding plans and even changed what was initially discussed. I held myself back as I watched them plan to use our money to finance their new wedding plan. I watched my husband sit there as the money machine as his role was taken from him. And all my daughter could do was clap and jump for joy. I was beginning to get mad as I watched them do their ridiculous one big family act thing. His wife mentioned when they would pick the wedding dress together, and she mentioned that if the money was ready, she could place an order immediately. I have never seen a more shameless couple in my entire life. I couldn't have their stupid stories anymore, so I stood up and declared in a loud voice, "Dear in-laws, since my daughter has found her new parents now, my husband and I would be glad to take our role as guests at the wedding. They would handle everything, and subsequent meetings would be handled by them too. You can all now take your leave. Children, if I want to talk to your manager parents, what has been your most embarrassing experience?" One time my granddad got a sausage roll at a football match during halftime. When he got back to his seat he found it was overdone. The pastry was quite burned. The man was irate. He didn't take it back straight away as the second half was about to start, but he spent much of the second half angrily lamenting his savory snack let down. So he takes it home, calls the customer service number on the back. I assume he had a few choice words for the poor soul on the other end, but I wasn't present for this, although I did overhear him saying his pastry was blacker than the heart of the evil man who made this sausage roll, and then keeps the remainder of the sausage roll in the freezer for the next couple of weeks. Skip ahead to the next match day. My granddad tells me we're heading out early so he can have his sausage roll replaced. The customer service line told him to go to kiosk 3 at the front of the ground next to the ticket office. When we arrive, however, the shutters are down at the food place. The old man looks around growling and turning red in the face, stamps right over to window number 3 of the ticket office and slams his frozen burned sausage roll down like a flaky gauntlet. At this point I'm trying to convince him the ticket office was a completely different department to the catering concession, but my granddad was having none of it. The lady working the ticket window continually attempted in vain to convince him the same. They sell match tickets, not hot snacks, but this just got him angrier and angrier. Across comes a colleague behind the glass. Now there's just 2 people to rage at. Then a head steward comes to attempt to defuse the situation and my granddad begins to wave the burnt sausage roll in this man's face. I was actually surprised he didn't whack him with it. At this point I'm mortified by the whole affair, wishing I'd have stayed back at the house until nearer kick-off. Eventually, after an hour or so, the shutters come up on the food concession. Fella at the counter goes, "You must be Mr. Alaginge," and calmly resolves the situation, dispatching a freshly baked sausage roll with the steady hands of a surgeon. My granddad is completely satisfied with the result of his hour of insolent rage. As we're walking away, he turns to me and says, "That's how you get these things sorted." Gunshot survivors of Reddit, what does it feel like to get shot? Right thigh 9mm, grazing shot across the front of the leg about 4 inches above the knee. It plowed a channel of skin and some flesh off the front. It felt searing hot, like someone had laid a hot piece of metal on my leg for a second. Then, the pain went away for a while until the adrenaline wore off. It honestly hurt worse 6 hours later than it did when it happened. I was randomly shot while walking down the street with my girlfriend in 2013. I didn't fall to the ground or anything like that. Walked into a store and told them to call the cops. It didn't hurt too bad at first. A slight pinch. The heat builds up and the pain comes in. Some throbbing as the blood pumps out. I was extremely lucky as the bullet lodged between my lower right ribs in the back just above my kidney. The aftermath was a really achy back. What I remember most was how everyone around me except for my girlfriend just walked around us like nothing happened. I was potentially dying and everyone just ignored it. Not my problem, I suppose. I lost a lot of faith in people that day. I got shot in the ankle when I was 10. Honestly, I thought a rock hit me. Just a slight stinging feeling. Didn't really hurt, I even kept running with my bike. Later at the hospital was a different story. The doctor tried to remove the bullet without putting me under. He said the pain medicine would make me forget everything. He gave up after a few minutes of hell. And, whatever he gave me didn't work as described, but it did oddly make everyone look purple from what I remember. So maybe it half worked? Lol.
I yelled at my sister-in-law at my wedding and told her no one cares that she is pregnant, and I don't regret it. My husband, 30 male, and I, 26 female, got married during COVID. We couldn't have a big ceremony because of restrictions, and unfortunately my family couldn't be present as they live in a different country. With restrictions finally lifted, we decided to have a more traditional ceremony in my home country with my family. My husband's family came, his parents, some friends, cousins and his sister, 32 female, we'll call her Sarah, and her husband, 28 male, we'll call him Matt. Sarah and Matt live on the other side of the US than the rest of the family. They had their wedding a couple of months back in their home state, and ever since then when we have a conversation, even without our wedding coming up, Sarah would say that she and Matt are planning to get pregnant on the trip for my husband and I's wedding. No big deal, I just made sure to tell her that she needs to ovulate for that to happen, but other than that I could not care less. What started to get annoying is when we were talking about all the activities and excursions people wanted to do so I could go ahead and book it, Sarah would always say, "Make sure there's enough time for Matt and I at the hotel so we can get busy making our baby." Again, kind of gross, a little annoying, but whatever, they are grown-ups. About a week before we all leave to go to my home country, Sarah and Matt arrive in our home state to spend time with family as they rarely see them. My husband and I, his parents, and my husband's brother and sister-in-law are sitting chatting, when Sarah blurts out she is pregnant. We all get really excited, congratulate them and saying how happy we are. We start asking some questions, and Sarah says she is 2 weeks pregnant. Everyone kind of loses a little bit of excitement and says, "Wow, that's really early." We suggest to wait before telling other people, just as a lot can happen. People usually don't even know they are pregnant until at least 6 weeks, and even then they are encouraged to wait until after the first trimester to tell people. My brother-in-law and sister-in-law were very happy and excited for them, but cautioned them even more as they have experienced multiple miscarriages before having their first child. Matt replied by saying they are only telling the people closest to them, his parents, her parents and her siblings, no one else since it is so early. Well, the next day, Sarah had called her great-uncle and his wife over for drinks and decided to tell them too, called her one aunt and uncle and told them, and by the end of the day basically the entire extended family knew, as well as some of her mom's friends, which stopped by the house and Sarah told. With each person Sarah told, Matt got more agitated, as they had agreed to only tell a select few people. Matt finally gave up and asked her why she doesn't just post it on Facebook as it will be quicker, to which she replied, she wants to, but she thinks it will be frowned upon. My husband came to me and said it feels like she is trying to draw the attention away from us and our wedding, as she is known to do anything and everything to have the spotlight on her. I said to not worry about it, as when we are in my home country, she isn't going to know many people so she won't say anything. He agreed, but went to his parents and told them what he was feeling, and asked if they could politely suggest that she keep it to herself when we left for the trip. They agreed that it was valid for him to feel that way, as they know she hates it if the focus is not on her. Anyway, we leave for the wedding and I see my mom for the second time in 5 years. Obviously it was a very emotional reunion, but we wiped off our tears quickly and sat down for a meal with my husband's family. After I introduced her to everyone, the waiter took our order and the first thing Sarah says to my mom is, "Your daughter probably already told you, but I won't be drinking this trip." My mom says that it's no problem, you don't have to drink to have fun, and that Sarah will still have fun, even if she chooses not to drink. Sarah interrupts my mom to tell her it's not by choice that she is not drinking, but that she is pregnant. Keep in mind this is 10 minutes after she met my mom. My mom says congratulations and keeps on with another conversation. Sarah interrupts my mom again and tells her how she is 2 weeks pregnant and just so excited. My mom, who is in medicine, then tells Sarah the same thing we did, that she should probably wait until she is in her second trimester to tell people, and Sarah completely ignores her. The same thing happens with my aunt, cousins, uncles, sister and grandparents, all of whom she had never met before. My husband yet again speaks to his parents and asks them to please tell her to keep it private because it feels as though she is purposefully trying to take the attention away from our wedding. They say they will talk to her. Matt actually comes up to us and apologizes, by saying he agrees that it has gotten out of hand and that the number of people that know is way more than the number they agreed upon. Fast forward, we are sitting eating while we wait for one of our excursions. A family that I lived with for 3 years when I first moved to my husband's country flew out for the wedding and met up with us for lunch. They have never met my sister-in-law. The wife and I are talking about the wedding and all the arrangements, while my sister-in-law sits across from us and listens to the conversation. My husband orders some shots for everyone at the table, when his mom says she doesn't want one, so he tells the server -1. My sister-in-law hears him ordering the shots and goes off yelling across the table, "I can't drink alcohol. You know I can't drink a shot. Why would you order me one?" Everyone kind of stops and looks at her for a second, before my husband says it's not a problem as Matt said he wants to. Everyone then continues their conversation, including the wife and I. My sister-in-law interrupts me and continues to make a big fuss over how my husband ordered her alcohol when he knows she's not drinking. The wife then says it's okay because Matt said he'll drink it so it's not going to waste. My sister-in-law then says again how annoying it is that my husband ordered her a shot, and I say to not worry about it, because I'll just drink it if Matt doesn't want it. She keeps doing this till I finally tell the wife she's not drinking because she is pregnant. The wife says congratulations and asks how far she is, and then also tells her to be careful of telling too many people. This situation happens about 3 more times in the week leading up to the wedding. Now this is why I might be the jerk. The last time it happened, she was telling my high school friends at the wedding how sick she has been, but no one asked why she was sick. They were just empathetic and saying they hope she feels better. They came over to me to talk to me, and she followed again complaining about how sick she has been, and kind of pushing them to ask why she has been feeling so sick, when I finally said, "Sarah, are you kidding me? No one gives a shit that you are pregnant, they don't even know you." Sarah ran off crying, and my mother-in-law heard me say that and told my father-in-law, who screamed at my husband saying how we hurt Sarah's feelings and how she is just excited. My husband doesn't think I did anything wrong, and my high school friends think I was fine too, because they know the backstory. My mom and some of my husband's family think I was the jerk. So am I wrong for telling my sister-in-law that no one cares that she is pregnant?
Am I the a-hole for cutting my children out of their father's inheritance? I was married to my ex-husband, John, for 10 years. We had 2 kids together, Kate and Luke. When the kids were 6 and 8, John went through a tragic, life-changing year. He was driving his parents to the airport and they were hit by an intoxicated driver. His parents died on impact and John was severely wounded. He spent almost 8 months in the hospital and ended up losing his right leg. John was never the same after that year. The combined loss of his parents and his career destroyed him. We stayed together for another year after he came home from the hospital. We all did therapy, and he was enrolled in a support group. In the end, he felt like he couldn't be a husband anymore and filed for divorce. For the next 15 years, he did his best to continue to be a father. I had full custody, but the kids would still see him on weekends. When I remarried, everything changed. My now husband, Ben, is an amazing stepfather. The kids fell in love immediately and slowly stopped trying to see their father. I tried to get them to continue their visits, but they refused more and more as they got older. John died about a month ago. When I told the kids about their father's death, neither had much reaction. At his funeral, it was supposed to be our family plus a few old friends of John. That is everyone he had in life. Both kids made excuses why they couldn't go to the funeral and neither attended. I am completely heartbroken for John. I realized they didn't have much of a relationship at the end of his life, but he was their father. He raised them though much of their childhood, and after that tragic year, still did his absolute best under the circumstances. I am disgusted that my children have no empathy for him. A week or 2 after the funeral, the eldest, Kate, called me to ask if anything had been left to her. Apparently, she is looking to buy a house and wanted to see if she would get any cash. I hung up on her. I invited Kate and Luke to my house and sat them down. I told them that their father had willed me everything. After the sale of his house and the cost of the funeral, it was about $60,000. I told them how disappointed I was in their lack of empathy. I then told them I don't think either of them deserve money. They were predictably upset and tried to argue, but I held firm. They both left shortly after. I haven't done anything with the money yet, but I want to donate it to the rehabilitation program that had supported John so many years ago. Am I the a-hole for refusing to give them the money he willed me? I hospitalized my sister. I've been dating my boyfriend Mark for about 5 years and he's the best thing that has ever happened to me. When we started dating, he was a bit closed off and was afraid to initiate any form of intimacy. I at first thought it was because I was his first relationship and maybe he was nervous. 6 months into us dating, he tells me that between the ages of 5 and 12 he was SI'd by his mother. His father left when he was around 4. When it got out, his mother was arrested and he was placed in intensive therapy and still goes to this day. Because we've been dating for so long and have marriage in mind, he told my family and they welcomed him with love and support. Now for my sister Sally, I've suspected she's had a bit of a crush on him. She'll flirt sometimes here and there, but he never reciprocated and usually ignored her. I've talked to her about it so many times but she didn't listen. I had gone out one Saturday afternoon and left Mark behind because he didn't feel like going. My sister had texted me prior to ask if she could borrow a few things from me. I said sure and to get it whenever. She went when I was out, unknowingly. When I came home I found my boyfriend on the ground crying his eyes out and my sister trying to calm him down. He was having a panic attack. It's never safe to touch him when he has an episode because he may act out violently due to his headspace. Her hands were over him. He was trying to get her away. Her shirt was also on the ground. I tore her away and asked what the F she was doing. She said that she was trying on the sweatshirt when he walked in on her, freaked out and went into an episode. However, Mark through his tears said she tried to SA him. I asked my sister if it was true and she said no, but Mark again said she tried to SA him. We have cameras in the house and I pointed it out to my sister. Her face went white and I don't know what came over me but I saw red. I can't remember much because I was so angry, but I went Iron Mike on her. Her nose was broken, a black eye and bruised ribs. She was in the hospital for a few days. Am I the a-hole for leaving my kids at my mom's house? I'm a 36-year-old father of 6-year-old twins. I cannot get them to stop yelling and arguing. It has gotten up to the point I almost crashed my super expensive sports car trying to stop them from yelling and kicking the seat. One weekend I took the kids to my mom's house to swim at the pool. I was then venting to my mother about them arguing all of the damn time, and the constant fist throwing. She suggested giving them therapy to set each other to have a good mood. But I didn't have enough money at the time. Most likely having about $200 left in my account after bills, not minding having to go grocery shopping. But in the middle of talking, I can hear a distant yelling. Not again. I yell. I storm outside to see my son putting the other in a headlock under the water. He was trying to drown him. I take off my shirt and I jump in to save my son from literally drowning. Not minding the fact that I was screaming at him to let him go beforehand. But he wouldn't stop, even if his life depended on it. So I throw him across the pool as hard as I can. Then I took my son out of the water. And he was not conscious. So I gave him CPR and he slowly started to wake up while vomiting and coughing up water, almost choking to death. I leave my other son with my mom, while he goes to the hospital. Still vomiting. After the doctor said he would be okay from now on, I went back to my mom's. I was screaming at my other son with my veins about to explode with anger. After that he stormed away to the backyard. After everything was settled on, I took my son to the mental health hospital. To see if that will help him. After he got out 2 weeks later, I took him to my mom's house. I was too tired of the behavior, so I told my mom to take them for a little while, as I let off some steam for a few weeks. I then returned after about a week. At my mother's house they were calm and mainly spent their day watching television together. Then we went home. And they haven't fought in a week. I was relieved at the fact they didn't even speak to each other. I don't know if my mom made them do something to get their act together. Or if the mental health hospital made a change. When have you ever encountered such rude service that you refused to buy the item? This is one of my favorite stories my mom told me. I'm not even sure if I have the facts right 100%, but I'll still try and tell it. My mom was born in Cuba, and lived there until she was 14, when the state of the regime forced her family out. She didn't go back until several years later, when she was way older and living in South Florida. By that time, she had lost her Cuban accent and could be easily confused to be a foreigner. She went back to Cuba in the 90s, a time of economic turmoil and struggle. This is important because it leads to extremely long lines to buy anything. So here's my mom, waiting in line with products she wants to buy. Several Cubans are in front of her waiting in the line as well. My mom says something, exposing her not Cuban accent to the worker, who tells her to come forward and skip everyone in front of her to buy what she needs. Now maybe this wouldn't upset people or be deemed as rude, but they were treating my mom like royalty because she was a tourist, and the people in front of her didn't deserve to be skipped just for that. My mom told the worker off, telling her she was in fact Cuban, and stormed out of the store, without buying a thing. My mom realized something wasn't right, even though she benefited from it and spoke her mind. Which is why I love this story so much. Sometimes, rude service isn't done to you directly. Sometimes you even benefit from such service that puts others down. But rude service is rude service, no matter to whom it is done. And we must always remember that. To treat others with respect, regardless of the gain. The saga of attention vampire Dan Ninen, the worst comedian alive. The way he tells it, Dan Ninen is a millennial who got his start in comedy when, as a senior Intel engineer, he took a comedy class to get over a fear of public speaking. And he was such a natural at it that he was getting booked by his own company to do his bits for 2,500 strong audiences on only his third ever performance, getting confused for a seasoned industry pro by his coworkers. He decided to quit his job and do comedy full time. His website is positively drowning in his own accolades, with the About section boasting he attended the inauguration of and performed for Barack Obama, in addition to Howard Dean and Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump, etc. He brags about how he's performed with comedy legends Jerry Seinfeld, Jim Gaffigan, Tim Conway, and Bob Saget. He's a Renaissance man who has taken acting roles in Hollywood films, plays violin after only a day of practice with no lessons, tours professionally playing keyboards, guitar, and bass guitar, has written his own book, and flies 200,000 miles a year to reach the schools, stadiums and concert halls constantly knocking down his door to book him. He can't even leave his phone on at night, or he gets woken up by all the calls. He's a millionaire who flies private to all of his gigs, owns expensive sports cars and Teslas, and sells out every show, never ending on less than a standing ovation, and all while keeping it clean and wholesome, fun for the whole family. There's no other way to say it. He's a veritable comedy star, nay, a comedy god. Ask anyone who knows the small-time comedy circuit, however, and you get a quite different story. A story about an unhinged, foul-mouthed, egocentric lunatic who never forgets or forgives a slight, however small. A story about a pathological liar who went scorched earth the first time someone ever told him he was unfunny and has never turned it off since. They'll tell you about. The Shadow Dan Danny Boy is a big talker in case you couldn't tell, but the fastest way to make the scales fall away from your eyes is to actually watch his stand-up bits. Wait, that's a mistake, excuse me, his stand-up bits. He has one routine which he has done since he came onto the scene, and it all revolves around how he feels entitled to do racist impressions without reproach because his dad is Indian and his mother is Japanese. So if he's not actually that funny at all, how about all those things he's spent his career bragging about? The many small-time lies of the Shadow Dan. Let's take these down in order. First off, there is no evidence that Dan Ninen ever worked at Intel, least of all the kind of high-profile position that would have had him traveling around the world to do tech demos with the chairman or warrant him having a corner office in view of the World Trade Center on 9/11. The same amount of evidence exists for him performing for anyone he says. Like, let's get real for a moment, you hadn't effing heard of the guy before the moment you read the title of this write-up, because no one has. The idea that the sitting president, bipartisan American party leadership, billionaires, or even the washed-up wives of 60s-era celebrities are among the throngs trying to book him is patently absurd. For such a high-profile comedian, Dan Ninen sure hasn't ever been credited. Even if he was a part of it, Slumdog Millionaire is also a total genre mismatch. It takes very gifted, multi-talented comedians like Jordan Peele, Seth Rogen or Donald Glover to do well in dramas, because they built their reputation on being a clown and now have to convince an audience that they're serious. Dan was never funny in the first place, but in the world he wants to convince you of, he was, and yet selling the lie relies on him being both unremarkable enough in his role that you credibly feel like you simply don't recognize him if you saw those films and great enough at acting that it's worth bragging about. It's completely oxymoronic, emphasis on the moronic. As for the claim that he learned the violin by himself in a day. Well, give it a listen, if you can stomach it. Not exactly bringing home the Grammys. The description honestly feels more like he recorded the video to stroke his ego, and then had to post hoc fictionalize the only possible context in which the video might credibly be seen as impressive. Dan Ninen's book, the best book on how to become a full-time stand-up comedian, at least exists, which is a step up from his movie credits, but it's $90 in paperback only. It's somehow the second of two results if you search Dan Ninen book on Amazon, below someone who is not Dan Ninen writing about something that is not comedy, and it's an utterly bog-standard advice book packaging publicly available, common-sense stuff he didn't come up with that you can find by just asking around for free. The top reviews are a mix of trolls raving about the book's usefulness as a pasta maker, and botted fluff pieces. Dan says he's a millionaire who flies private and owns expensive sports cars and luxury electric vehicles. You have not heard of him. A studio that looks like a private jet for Instagram photoshoots starts at $50 for 1 hour in Los Angeles. You do the math. So, I sense you, reader, asking the next question, if these are the small-time lies that Shadow Dan has told, easily disproven lies about credits he doesn't have on industry-standard publicly available credit websites or attending presidential events. Dear Lord, what else is he lying about? And more importantly, in the face of everything else he's lied about, what could these other lies be that they qualify as the big ones? Shadow Dan's ancient crypt. You see, Dan's not a millennial. He's 62. He was lying about being in his mid-30s when he was pushing 60. What purpose could this lie possibly serve? Well, a few. It helps to bear in mind how the perception of him as a millennial helps his brand. Not only is Generation X not particularly known for anything, but if he's supposedly on the younger side, it helps with the perception that he might have interesting or valuable insights, and the general idea that he isn't washed up yet. And it no doubt helps to swing pay negotiations in his favor if the buyer thinks there's a reason he's both cheap and in demand. In so many words, being an up-and-comer is a big part of his sales pitch. Dan is also a world-class narcissist, and he's obsessed with his public image and reputation, so it's very probable that he simply doesn't feel like he deserves to age like the rest of us dirty-minded, substance-addict comedy mortals. I mean, if he's an old guy, that's just one more reason to dismiss him out of hand, and Shadow Dan doesn't do well with dismissal. Speaking of, he's about as popular as letting people play darts with your painted rear. Dan Ninen is neither famous nor infamous, but he does hold a certain kind of nefarious quality with those people who took enough time to talk crap, but not read what he does to crap talkers. I've said a lot of negative things about Dan Ninen here, and I intend to continue doing that, but nobody could deny that he is terminally online brand conscious. He likes to know when people are talking about him, and what they're saying, so he's always keeping a weather eye out for anyone who might happen to be discussing him. Part of this is the podcast circuit. See, self-promotion for stand-up comedians, especially small ones, often comes down to good networking. You play your local bars when you can, but if you want offers to come out to some city and play a club for a night or two, you need to put yourself out there, which a lot of comedians do by taking guest spots on podcasts, often hosted by other current and former comedians. Comedians hosting comedians, naturally, leads to talk about the comedy scene, where the odd stand-up with the misfortune to open for or be opened by Dan Ninen might happen to mention his name so they can laugh about how goddamn weird he is. And Shadow Dan inevitably takes notice. Ninen is a master of data voids, which is using a lack of queries in a search engine about a given subject to populate it with agenda-driven information that presents a biased view of the subject. It's popular among the alt-right, the dregs of Gamergate, 4chan trolls. And Dan Ninen. That's why, despite me being far from the first person to talk about him, to this day, if you Google his name, his tapings, website, and dead air social media accounts come up before the video essays and articles. This kind of search manipulation takes a lot of upkeep, usually done by amorphous internet mobs spending man-hours rather than one dedicated user spending his linear hours, meaning he gets a lot of exposure to the things he's trying to bury, and that has its effects on a narcissistic personality. How this has manifested for Dan Ninen is that every person who has ever slighted him on a podcast or in person has been put on a diluted email list, where he sends constant spam about all the success he enjoys running the corporate comedy circuit, and how he attracts the ire of awful booze-drinking addict comedians, by getting paid tens of thousands plus room and board for gigs in the UAE or the East Coast. Is it true that people can feel their family members pass away? My friend Rick is a very serious guy, conservative, mid-30s. He's not particularly religious, doesn't drink or do drugs, and he doesn't believe in anything supernatural. He's into hunting, fishing, eating deer and wild animals, and that's about it. He's not the type to tell tall tales, that's why I believed him when he told me this. When Rick was 24, he was in the bathroom when he heard someone walking around his house. It was his brother, Mikey. Rick is really surprised to see him because his brother is at college across the country. I just want to tell you everything is cool, man. I'm fine. Mikey says. Rick is like, what the duck is going, what happened? Mikey says, I gotta go now, sorry, don't have time to stay. Love ya. And walks out the front door. Rick is confused and cannot speak. He said it felt like he was frozen, actually got shivers, and could not speak the entire time. When he could finally move, he ran out the door after Mikey. Mikey is gone. There's no sign of him, no car engines driving away, nothing. Rick immediately calls Mikey. This was the early 00s days before everyone had phones. No answer. Rick calls his mom. She answers and he tells her that Mikey just showed up at his place acting weird. She has no idea. Both of them try to contact Mikey for the rest of the day, to no avail. Rick drives around the neighborhood looking for him. About an hour later, Mom calls Rick. Mikey died in a car accident late the night before. The car wasn't found until morning, it was in a field way off the road.
My ex-fiancé refused to respect my boundaries, so I married his best friend. He forgot he cheated on me and freeloaded, so I married his best friend. Back in 2019, I had just moved my long-term partner into my house due to a series of poor life choices on his end. It had been a rocky relationship for most of its duration, but I was young and dumb. I believed this was him wanting to commit and, indeed, start our lives. By early 2020, we were engaged. I was a full-time university student, sole caretaker for my mentally disabled mother, and taking care of the house and our pets. He worked a standard 40-hour-a-week minimum wage job and refused to help with any aspect of life. I found out on Christmas Day 2020 he had been unfaithful and had forgotten to tell me. He was planning on leaving me but had informed everyone except me because he failed to secure a new residence. Apparently, his F-buddy didn't like him enough to let him move in. At this point, there was very little love lost. I expected he would move out within the coming weeks. Fast forward 3 months, and his search for a living place was non-existent. He was acting more and more entitled. Clearly, by this point, he is an unwelcome freeloader who has taken up residence in my living room. I was about to secure an eviction notice to get him off my couch. He began swiping Tinder with his phone volume loudly on. I told him not to do that in my presence as it was highly insensitive to do it in my home, and he could do it privately. This continued, so I told him I would sleep with one of his friends. It was said in a moment of anger and was more of an empty threat then. However, I am known for seeing goals to their completion. I messaged the guy, supposedly my ex's best friend and the best man for the wedding. It turns out he didn't even consider my ex a close friend, and my ex had acted similarly terrible to this guy. We bonded over our awful experience, hit it off well, and started dating. I was upfront about the catalyst for me to reach out to him. After 2 years of dating, we were married on April 2nd. He watched me graduate with that bachelor's degree my ex disliked. I'm halfway through my master's, and my husband works in a specialized steady field that supports us. Last I heard, my ex got kicked out of his dad's house, never was able to officially date his side chick, and has not made any choices to better his life. I asked my professor out and his reaction shocked me. Let me just start out by saying that I'm a grown woman. I'm 25 years old and I recently went back to my town's community college to pursue a new degree. I had no idea it would lead to one of the most physically exhilarating experiences of my entire life. Anyway, college has been sort of tough, being one of the oldest people in all my classes has not been easy. Yet, I'm proud of myself for going back and this is my very last semester before graduating. I have met a lot of interesting people so far and I've had a few great professors. But no one like Professor G, even just saying his name in my head makes me blush. Professor G was my English professor for my final English course this past semester. He is drop-dead handsome and we established a friendship over the semester. I loved his class and I shared a lot of my writing with him. We would speak before and after class and always had such an easy time making conversation with each other. He seemed like a younger professor, I think he was in his early 40s. Sure enough, as the semester progressed, I developed a big fat crush on Professor G. I always thought about making a move on him, but I really didn't want to harass him at all while he was still my teacher. My crush kept growing though, and by the end of the semester, I was thinking dirty thoughts about Professor G as I sat right in front of him in class. I have never wanted a man so bad, so on the last page of my final, I wrote my phone number with a little heart. I was shaking as I handed my paper in and told Professor G to have a good summer. I had never done something so bold. Anyway, I was proud of myself for shooting my shot, but I knew it was a long shot and I truly didn't expect to hear from him. I didn't hear from Professor G, that was until it had been a full week since the semester graduated and I was officially not his student anymore. That's when I got a flirty text from him out of nowhere, asking me to dinner. I said yes of course, and even though I had butterflies all night, it was an amazing date. He took me to a high-end restaurant and paid for everything. He was so flirty and playful during the date, he was getting me so flustered. I couldn't resist him anymore, and at the end of the date when he kissed me goodbye I told him how bad I wanted him, and that he should take me home right there and then. He didn't answer, he just ordered an Uber to his place, took me in his arms and passionately made out with me the entire ride over. He literally carried me into his house and threw me onto the bed. It was the most intense, fiery physical connection I've ever experienced. He was much more experienced than me and treated my body like it was made of gold. I truly had no idea that I could experience intimate pleasure of that level, and thinking back to that night gives me goosebumps. Either way, that was about a month ago, and since then we have been seeing each other weekly. He always takes me on a fancy dinner date before taking me home and slutting me out. Eventually, I know I have to ask him what we are, but for now, I'm just riding the waves of pleasure as they come.
My mother compared me to my cousin, so I snapped and compared her to her sister. Now, I am considering reporting her to the authorities because she slapped me. My mom and I 16 got into an argument a few days ago about my grades. My grades are a thing we argue about a lot. My mom checked my grades while I was out at work. I know they're horrible, but I can't help it. The reason my grades are so low is that I never have the energy or time to do assignments. I wake up, go to school, and go to work until 11 p.m. on school nights at 1 or 2 a.m. on weekends. Then I go home, clean, and if I have an appetite then make food and then go to sleep and the cycle repeats. I'm exhausted when I get home often. I can't sleep, and I don't even have the energy to change clothes or shower. During our argument, my mom said, "Why can't you be more like cousin name?" It's something she's said before, but I was already in a really bad mood and snapped back at her, saying, "Why can't you be like cousin mom's name?" She looked at me like she saw a ghost, and I started apologizing profusely. She slapped me and told me to go to my room, so I did. I tried talking to her that night, but she ignored me. I know what I said was wrong, but I can't help but feel she deserves it. For context, my cousin and her family are pretty wealthy. Her mom is a doctor, and her dad is a lawyer, so I'm sure you can imagine their total income while my mom and I barely survive on our combined income. I have to give her 95% of my paycheck, including all tips, so I don't have much. I'm a waitress, and what I get goes into food. I often go days without food, while my cousin eats out almost every day. They'll invite me, but I can never go due to work or my mom not allowing me. My cousin and her family also go on vacation 3 to 5 times a year, which I'm invited to but can't ever go to. I know my mom tries her best to provide for me and her as my bio dad bailed out when my mom got pregnant with me, but I often feel myself resent her because I see her going out on dates in luxury restaurants, which are all paid for while I'm stuck at work, starving. While on a date, she always orders more than she can eat and takes the rest home. I'm not allowed to have any of it, or I'll get in trouble. She'll also often bring guys over, and I'll have to come home after a long day to hear the sounds of my mom having fun in the bedroom. I love my mom so much, but it's been a few days since we talked, and I feel like such a bad daughter. I'd love advice on how to fix things or what to do about this situation. So am I the a-hole? Update: I went to my cousin's house and showed her parents the post. My aunt, mom's sister, started apologizing for my mom's actions while her husband was getting me some food. My aunt told me she would subtly begin coming over more with food. I told them some more things that weren't mentioned. Some of those things included that my mom slapping me wasn't the first time she laid hands on me. I left that out because, as some said, I didn't know it wasn't normal. My mom would never hit me so hard that it bruised, but hard enough it would hurt for a few hours or even days. My cousin's dad offered to call the authorities and be my lawyer for the potential case. I told him to hold on to the authorities and took his offer.
What seemingly nice person turned out to be a monster. My two best friends. I spent nearly all of my free time with two guys growing up. Us three were inseparable. They were my brothers and I loved them. We first met in 1st and 3rd grade. We all grew up watching the same movies, playing the same games, and doing the same activities. As a result, we just grew fonder the longer time went on. We had our ups and downs, and even times of serious arguments, but we always ended up back together in the end. Cut to when I'm 24 and it's been hard the past couple years. One seems to have zero aspersions, and the other has become the biggest mooch you could find. My one friend kept hitting on my girlfriend for a year and a half straight. She made it very clear that she was friends with him but nothing more. He got drunk one night and threw himself at her trying to make out with her. It was the last straw. I cut him out entirely. My other friend, the mooch, stole from me about 2 weeks later. He'd owed me a ton of money because he never worked. I always paid his way. I knew if never get the cash back when I paid his way, but I wanted him to be included. He was a brother. Having to have someone pay for you and stealing are quite different things though. He wouldn't admit fault when I caught him, nor would he apologize. That was my sign that he was no longer a mooch, but now a thief. I decided to cut him out too. All that being said, I miss them every day. I wish they would have matured and we could have all stayed friends. They're like 90% of my childhood memories, so it's hard to not think about them. But I guess they probably don't feel the same. 20 plus years of friendship was worth trying to get a girl and $68 to them. I hope they're doing good, but I'll never let them back into my life.
Tried seducing him for 10 hours, but one scene from Megan Fox's movie instantly turned him on. This happened yesterday. I was trying to initiate intimacy and tried for whole 10 hours from dropping hints, to touching, to kissing and even flat-out dirty talk, but he was as cold as a rock. I gave up and after dinner he sat down watching TV while I was doing the dishes. A Megan Fox movie came on and my husband immediately and suddenly changed his mood. He's now feeling hot and is breathing heavily. It was even one of those sexy scenes. He is obsessed with her. I look at him and say, really? I've been trying to get this reaction from you for 10 whole hours. He says, what? No one turns me on quite like Megan. I say, so no sex then, huh? And he responds, well, not until you start trying to look more like Megan. He said this so casually I almost lost my cool. We had a fight, word from me, word from him, and he went to sleep in the guest's room. Not gonna lie, I cried because I felt humiliated and ignored after all I've done for him.
My daughter won't speak to me. I want her back in my life. I want to start off by saying that I know I was the one who ruined our relationship, but it's been 3 years already. I just don't see why she can't come around. I miss her terribly and she's my one and only girl, my only child. I should explain, I, 43, married my current wife, 21, 3 years ago. It had caused quite some backlash from my friends, my community, some of my family members, my ex and of course, my daughter. But I had to marry my wife. She's the only one for me. She's beautiful, she's intelligent, she's a kind and caring woman. I knew my daughter would have some problems with my marriage, but I never expected how harsh she could have been. She begged me to end this marriage. She pleaded with my wife to leave me. I had to admit, I'm not proud of myself, but I told her that I wished she was never born, that I resented her and that she meant nothing to me. I already had a rocky relationship with my daughter. She never approved of my relationship with my wife, but we would at least have a talking relationship. Since that day she hasn't spoken to me since. If I am being honest, I miss her and I decided to see on social media how she was doing. She's engaged. I am her father, and I found out about my own daughter's engagement through social media. That was when I knew I had made a serious mistake. I don't want to miss out on any more of her milestones in life. I contacted her through social media, but she had blocked me. I want to reach out to her again. I want her back in my life, but I need advice. I will be editing this post to answer some questions and paint a clearer picture. For one, I did not meet my wife when she was a minor. That would have been extremely disgusting and I would have seen her differently if I had. Everything about our relationship had been legal and there was clear consent. I met her when she was 18. We dated for a total of 8 months before we had gotten married. She had always been more reserved and shy, so we agreed on an elopement. I am not planning to have any more children in the near future. As for the relationship between my wife and my daughter, they weren't enemies, they were simply friends. She had started coming over and a relationship between us naturally developed. She was skeptical at very beginning, but I truly love her and I know she feels the same. I must also say, my wife is an adult woman, she is not some baby. The way that a lot of you consider her to be a child is frankly disturbing and hurtful towards her. She can make her own decisions and she chose to be with me. Why else has she stayed by my side for 3 years? What's the worst first impression you've ever made? Last night, my wife's boss from her brand new job invited us over for dinner. On the drive over, my wife reiterated many times to me just how important it was to make a good impression. She had worked really hard for this job and was very excited to get to know the boss so that she could build a future with the company. I scoffed and arrogantly informed my silly wife that I always make good impressions. She didn't seem too worried, since I am generally quite charismatic and people love me. My wife's boss is a married man in his 50s, so it was the three of us and his wife. We chit-chatted over drinks and salads and seemed to really be hitting it off. They laughed at my well-timed, perfectly appropriate jokes and my wife seemed pleased. Like I told my wife, she had no reason to worry. Soon she brought out the main course, a nice big juicy steak for each of us. Ribeyes, my favorite. As I began to cut into my steak, I was sad to discover how undercooked this steak was. Now, I've had my fair share of rare steak. I prefer medium, but I can handle a proper rare. This was several minutes on a hot grill short of rare. A well-trained vet probably could have resuscitated the cow had they tried. Knowing that I had to make a good impression, I sat there fidgeting with my knife and fork, worrying about how I was going to get away with not eating the steak. Could I claim veganism? No, I'd already feigned great enthusiasm upon seeing the steak. To be fair, it looked amazing before I cut into it. Just then, the couple excused themselves to the kitchen to take care of some dessert preparations. As I looked across the fancy dining room table at the open window of this third-story apartment, a cartoon light bulb appeared over my head. I knew I had to be decisive, realizing that they could return at any moment. I committed to the mission. I grabbed the steak with my hand, gently shook off the juice and executed a perfect throw. Right through the center of the open window. Here's the problem. The window wasn't open. It was the cleanest window you've ever seen in your life. I could have sworn that I could feel the breeze coming through what seemed like an open window. That is, until my mostly raw slab of steak slammed up against it and slowly slid down, leaving a trail of steak juice around the window, with more juice splattered on the nearby wall. My wife, whose steak was a nice medium rare and was unaware of my predicament, turned slowly, jaw dropped slowly, and stared at me slowly like I was an alien from another planet. This look then slowly morphed into an expression of demonic anger. The couple heard the thud of the steak on window impact and came quickly to make sure we were okay. They took in the scene, the steak sitting on the windowsill, the blood trail, my empty plate, and then gave me an inquisitive, puzzled look. I just didn't know what to say. It felt like a minute of silence, but was probably 3 or 4 seconds. Finally, the best I could manage was I'm so sorry. I am such a klutz. I don't know. I was just cutting it and it slipped. Just ask my wife, I really am a klutz. Right, honey? No help coming from that direction, I will clean this up. I can't believe this. I am so sorry. Both women continued to stare at me like I had escaped from a nearby mental hospital, as I smeared the blood around the window with my cloth napkin, dusted off the steak from the windowsill, and continued to mutter my incoherent explanation. I knew no one was buying the story. I knew what I had to do. I sheepishly returned to my seat and proceeded to eat every bite of that disgusting, cold, chewy, bloody, raw steak. I remained pretty quiet the rest of the evening. The vibes got a bit better when the dessert came out, but it was obvious that no one had really gotten over it. My wife's only 2 words to me since the incident are "I'm fine." Would I be the a-hole for asking our friend to return a baby shower gift after a miscarriage? I know this sounds awful and I feel like it might be a terrible thing to do, so I need some advice. My husband has a long-term family friend named Jen. Jen and I aren't friends at all, but we are friendly when we see each other. When Jen had her first kid, my husband purchased a fairly expensive item off of her baby shower registry as a gift, around $200, $300 if I recall correctly. I had no issue with the gift or how much he spent. It was a nice item to give her and we were excited for her to grow her family with her then boyfriend, now husband. Fast forward a few years, Jen and her husband are high earners, both making over 6 figures. Jen announced she was pregnant again very early on and sent my husband her baby shower registry with her announcement text, which was full of high-priced items. Personally, I thought this was strange because she should still have most of the items from her first kid, and I didn't think people usually did full-blown baby showers/registries after their first. I was also surprised she was asking for gifts when she was still in the first trimester, but I'm a cautious person who didn't announce my pregnancy until 20 weeks, which I know is extreme on the other side. I left it up to my husband what he wanted to do, but mentioned to him that I was surprised she was organizing another shower/gifting event since she already has a young kid and got brand new stuff then. My husband spent around $400 on a gift for her, fine with me. A few weeks later, Jen had a traumatic miscarriage. I won't get into the details, but she was devastated, and the cause of the loss likely means she won't be able to carry future pregnancies to term. It's incredibly sad, and while I'm not close with Jen, my heart hurt for her. It's been a few months since her loss and my husband is now unsure of how to navigate the gift. It's not something she can use for her older kid. Asking her to return the gift seems cruel, like adding a chore onto her grief, and it's probably past the return window anyway. I'm also not sure if she's going to keep trying to have more kids, very risky for the baby and herself, and it seems incredibly insensitive to ask, plus she may not have decided yet. Asking her to pay us back for it also seems very cruel. My husband and I are also decently high earners, but $400 is still a lot of money. It's one thing if she's able to get a few years of use out of the item, that's money well spent. But if it's going to sit in a box in her attic for years, that's where we are getting stuck. So, would we be TA if we asked about getting the gift back? Ideally, we could get our money back somehow, although it's probably too late. If we can't, then I'd at least like to give it to someone else who can use it. I feel awful just saying that, but it's how I feel. However, this is such a sensitive subject and we don't want to pressure her if she's not ready to discuss it. Update: I appreciate the feedback I've gotten. We will not be asking Jen about the gift. We don't want to make her feel worse than she already is. Given her statements in the past regarding adoption, I doubt she will find alternative ways to have another child if she is unable to do so biologically. But that's her path to walk. If she doesn't use it, I hope she at least donates the item to someone who needs it. People have also commented on my tone, and I just wanted to clarify that Jen is truly only my husband's friend, not mine. We aren't couples friends with her and her husband. Jen and my husband were close as kids but haven't been close for years, before I ever came into the picture, sort of like a cousin you grew up with but only talk to at major holidays now. I don't hate Jen, but we have very different worldviews, so we likely won't ever be close. I'm sympathetic to Jen's loss as a person and as a person who has also experienced miscarriages, but I am not personally devastated by it, if that makes sense. If my husband wrote the post, the tone would have been different. Given how long they've known each other and how she's so integrated into their family, he felt it was appropriate to give her a big ticket item, which I thought was justified. I do wish he had waited to send it because I warned him that it was very early in her pregnancy and anything could happen. I will be logging out of this throwaway. Thanks. My little sister dated a 27-year-old man, and I don't know what to do. My little sister is 15, she's in grade 9, and the man she supposedly dated is 27. This is very weird, so trigger warning. I don't know what to do. Last night around 2 a.m., my little sister called me and cried about how she had a fight with her boyfriend. I tried to console her, and I told her that it'll pass since most teenagers in relationships often have petty disagreements. She told me he wasn't a teenager, and that he was actually 27. I kept quiet on the phone for a bit before asking her what the situation was and how she managed to be with a 27-year-old man. She told me they met here in Reddit under this subreddit, and that they started talking at the end of April/early May. I tried to explain to her that she was being groomed, and she told me he wasn't grooming her, and that she consented to everything in the relationship even though she knew that she cannot consent to anything like that under 16. And I'm sure as hell that he knows that too. Saying I was and still am pissed is an understatement. Not even the word disgusted can explain how I'm feeling about this. She told me they've never met in person, and that their relationship was online and long distance, but they've had long video calls and voice calls with each other and texted. She told me the reason why they broke up was because she accused him of something, and strongly believed in that accusation. I asked my little sister what she accused him of, and she told me the whole story, and how they have been fighting and that he has been very upset with her because of it. She said he called her manipulative, crazy and lonely. I don't know why he's talking when he's literally creeping on my little sister. I told her to send me their chats. She was hesitant at first because she was scared I would expose him because he didn't deserve whatever consequences he'd face for speaking to a minor. I told her I wouldn't and that I just wanted to have a better understanding of what their relationship was like. She sent me almost everything. Screenshots of them talking about traveling the world, meeting up, having a family together, their fight, and even some personal information I didn't even know about my sister. They already said I love you to each other. He called her names like baby, babe, my love, cutie, hon in their chats, at endless red heart and pleading face emojis. The more I read, the more disgusted I became. I found chats of intimate texting, chats of him telling her his private size, how Magnum latex don't even fit, and even private pics. They had been sending intimate pictures to each other, intimate texting, talking about how he fantasized about her and touched himself to the thought of her every morning before he started his day. I feel angry, disgusted, sad. I can't find proper words to explain my frustration. I don't know what to do, or to say. I haven't spoken to my sister since she called me, and I don't even know what I'm going to tell her when I do. A selfish police officer destroyed my sense of self-worth because an entitled Karen accused me of stealing from her without any proof. As a homeless man, I know I should be used to being treated badly by now, but I'm not, and every time it hurts just as much as the first time. So yesterday I got caught in the terrible rain, so all my clothing was soaking wet. I slept in wet clothes while shivering all night. Now it's today, and I know I have to get my clothing dry because it's going below freezing tonight. I took the opportunity to go to the laundromat to wash and dry my belongings with the little bit of spare change I have left. Well, by the door of the laundromat, there's this fellow older homeless man who sits outside the laundromat daily. I have spoken to him several times, and we spoke today too. He looked very hungry, so I gave him one of my 2 bologna sandwiches, and we sat and ate together. Trust me when I say bologna on bread when you're homeless is a feast. While we were eating, a pompous and plump woman walked into the laundromat, then right out shortly after. The other man left after eating, and I went in to dry my stuff. I waited for 45 minutes in the dryer. I'm sitting in the corner, charging my phone, waiting for my stuff to be dry. I remember it clearly, there were 14 minutes left on the dryer. The door opens, and in walks a cop that I saw earlier standing outside, talking to his partner. Visibly mad, she was pointing at me and raising her voice. She was outside, and I couldn't hear what she was saying. The cop walked in and was an a-hole. He told me to bring out my ID. I asked what's going on, and I was told to do as I'm told. I said no, asking what I've done. I'm just waiting for my stuff to dry. The Karen outside apparently had her laundry, which she left to wash and dry, stolen, and guess who she blamed for the theft? Yep, this homeless guy. The cop told me, when we find her stuff on you, you're going to jail, you worthless scum. Worthless scum. I did start to get a bit mad. I said, forget that, look, I ain't got anything on me. I dumped my big green bag upside down and took everything out, and out fell a donut I had wrapped and was saving for later. I was really excited to eat this donut. Anyway, when everything fell out I told the cop to go ahead, arrest me. I haven't done anything besides my laundry. He told me that if I know where it is, I better tell him now, or it won't end well for me. I said I did not know, so he stomped on my donut and totally squished it into the floor. He went outside to the Karen, who was still out there jumping up and down, causing a huge scene. After, I took my stuff out of the dryer. The cops came in again with Karen to go through my clothing to make sure none of it's hers. I felt totally violated as they laughed looking at my clothes with rips and tears in them. But that's it. I know I should be used to this treatment now, but it still hurts. Gamers of Reddit, what's the most awkward situation you've encountered while on mic? I made a major faux pas while playing Rainbow Six Vegas with my buddies. My friend Ed had invited me to join him and his brother in the game, and on Saturday we all jumped in together. Things weren't going too great for our team as we were up against some serious opposition. In the midst of all the chaos, one of our teammates suggested flanking the enemy, but he kept getting unalived every time he tried it. Meanwhile, I was positioned as a sniper taking shots from a safe distance. Eventually Ed and I were the only ones left on our team, but we found ourselves completely surrounded by enemies with no cover whatsoever. Ed expressed his frustration saying something like, "Shit man, we're screwed." That's when it all went wrong. I had forgotten that my mic was still on from an earlier conversation with my friends about being too sick to go out that night, so everyone in the game including Ed could hear everything we said. Just as he was speaking, his mom, let's call her Jane, called him upstairs for dinner, reminding him to finish his homework before playing games again, and then abruptly hung up, reminding him not to swear because it made her cringe. Instantly realizing what had happened, Ed apologized profusely, saying sorry to his mom, expressing that he hadn't heard her come upstairs and apologizing for any swearing he may have done before promising to go do his homework right away. Unfortunately, moments later Ed got unalived by an enemy, apologizing again before respawning, which just added insult to injury, making this whole situation even more embarrassing than it already was.
I ruined my sister's gender reveal out of spite. Straight into it. My sister had been sleeping with my then boyfriend and only revealed this fact after we got engaged, so as to save me from getting married to a cheater, and because she felt remorseful and ashamed, I broke up with him and cut off my sister, only tolerating her during family gatherings, which I rarely ever came to if I knew she was going to be there. I moved to another state for a job and to start afresh, so I've been away from home for quite a while. Months later, I was told my sister and ex-boyfriend got engaged. To say I was livid was an understatement, but I wasn't going to let them disturb me from my life. I came back recently, at my mother's request, since she assured me my sister wouldn't be there, only to find out she was in fact there. I managed to calm myself and pretend I was okay with everything. Deep down I was upset, swore at my mom for lying to me. It turns out they called me for my sister's planned gender reveal party, which I would have never attended had I known beforehand. I never even knew she was pregnant, but I was there already, so I had to put on my fake smile. Night came, and for the first time in a long time, my sister engaged me in a conversation and apologized for everything and wanted to make up. I wanted to bite her head off and tell her to go to hell because the frickin' audacity, but then she told me about the gender of her baby. She already knew, to try and rekindle the times where we used to tell and trust each other with everything. At some point as we were talking, I was reminded of when we used to be best friends, and honestly, I was tired of the bitterness and wanted to let bygones be bygones. I watched her plan out everything, spend a ton of money, excited and all, but just the night before the gender reveal, my ex-boyfriend showed up and it took me right back to the past. It kept playing over and over in my head how I was betrayed by them, and I got absolutely pissed at how they were happy even after what they did to me. I realized I never had the intention of ever forgiving them, so in an attempt to get back at them, I told everyone the gender of the baby right then and there. One glance at her and she was on the verge of tears, staring at me with the cheating scumbag. She didn't say anything and just stormed off. It was awkward. Everybody immediately knew why I did it, so it didn't come as a surprise. Nobody said anything and we all called it a night. I'm not going to lie, it felt good seeing them distraught. It brought me a sense of comfort. All their money had gone to waste since she was upset and refused to leave her room, so the reveal never happened. The house is quiet, but I can see the judgmental looks I'm getting from everyone, so I'm booking a flight back because there's no point in me being here anymore. I don't feel an ounce of regret. In fact, I feel peaceful and at ease.
Leave me for dead? I'll destroy your fraternity. After high school ended, I was in a pretty bad place mentally, so I decided to make some extremely unwise decisions during my first year of college. I was basically always on something in order to keep what I later realized was severe depression at bay. For a variety of misplaced reasons, I also decided to join a fraternity. It was a convenient way to keep getting the things I thought I needed at the time, but mostly I just craved human connection in a way that I thought being a brother would bring. Well, I didn't see it for a while, but I was wrong. The fraternity had a house on campus that was allocated to them, but it might as well have been off campus because of how crazy the parties were. Campus police would rarely pass by, let alone come in, no matter how much noise was being made. Still, that made it the perfect place for me. I could let loose and escape the sadness that followed me around during the day without being bothered, and the people there seemed to like me well enough that they at least tolerated me being around so often. At first it was just official parties on the weekends, and then every weekend, Thursday nights, Wednesday nights, until at one point I was spending hours drinking there every night of the week to hide from myself. Before I knew it, my first semester was over and the shallow friendships I had made through the bonds of getting ridiculously messed up had started to pay off, or so I thought. They told me they'd be extending an offer to be a pledge next semester. For those that don't know, pledging is a process that lasts, for this particular chapter of this fraternity, 1 semester, and is something that you have to go through to officially become a member, of a fraternity. I was ecstatic. My second semester rolls around and I'm given the invitation in traditional, stupid, ritualistic fraternity fashion. Once again, I was ecstatic. The thought that I was actually wanted and valued by these people, who I thought had it all figured out, felt like it would be the highlight of my year. I never really fit in with most members of the fraternity, because other than an excessive consumption of substances and alcohol, we didn't really have much in common, but I started to look up to these guys. While most of my time there passed by in a haze of my own creation, the moments that I remembered made them seem like kind, cool, and genuine people. Although most of my friendships during that year were with the people from this particular fraternity, I had made some friends in my own dorm hall as well. One night after pre-gaming in someone's dorm, I was happy for any excuse to start drinking at 3 p.m. A couple girls came up to me. They asked why I was pledging at that particular frat, given its reputation. Why someone as nice as me would want to be around people like that. I asked what they were talking about and they told me that particular frat house has a reputation as a place where girls shouldn't get too drunk, trying to be as not graphic as possible here. I told them that it must be a rumor that started because of guys who already graduated, because there was no way any of the brothers I knew would ever do something like that. I second-guessed my sense of belonging for the first time that night, but was too starved for human connection to seriously consider that I might not be making the best choices. Still, a small crack had formed in the facade I had built around these people. Another night, I overheard a couple of the brothers talking when I woke up to use the bathroom, talking about how they desperately needed members to keep the house and how it was a shame that they had to let me become a brother at the end of the semester, because they'd normally never let someone like me in. Fine, I thought, that's how these three feel, but most of the others like me and actually want me here. Wrong. But my life was in pieces before I got to college and I was so desperate for friends and a sense of belonging, that I was willing to rationalize anything to keep the lie going. One night while doing a traditional, stupid, ritualistic fraternity event, consuming copious amounts of alcohol to the point of serious risk, for brothers and pledges only, I did what they expected of me and consumed copious amounts of alcohol to the point of serious risk. For anonymity's sake I won't describe the event for privacy's sake, but I was in and out of blacking out for a while, until a certain point when I stopped remembering anything. Over the years, though, some things have come back to me as I've tried to process this experience. I have flashes of being turned over and someone holding my head so I throw up in a trash can and not myself or the chair I was on. There's a slideshow of me fall walking down half the stairs. One of the last things I remember is asking to stay the night in one of the brothers' rooms because I knew, somehow, that I was ridiculously drunk, and didn't want to get caught when going back to mine. He said no. He was my closest friend there. It should have been clear to anyone around that I wasn't safe, but these guys were still giving me crappy light beer instead of water because it's basically the same thing. I'll never get that line, or the laughter that followed, out of my head. Instead of getting me help, or even just letting me stay there, one of the brothers just took me back to my dorm. Luckily for me, a resident advisor saw me being brought in essentially over his shoulder, and felt like I was in danger, so she called for help. Even after all these years, the last thing I remember from that night is answering a knock at the door of my dorm. When I woke up in the hospital the next morning, I was told that I could have died. They described how I acted, and it was clear to me after just hearing about it that I was in danger. My BAC, blood alcohol concentration, was at 0.37, and there was somehow still more in my stomach that I hadn't thrown up before they pumped it. For reference, alcohol poisoning can cause death and generally shows up around 0.30, while 0.40 is potentially fatal on its own, because your heart or lungs can just stop working. My resident advisor almost certainly saved my life. When I was sitting in that hospital bed, I cried. Not because I might have died, but because I felt like my life that I was just getting back had fallen apart again. I felt broken, betrayed, and profoundly sad that the people I trusted didn't care enough about me to try and keep me alive. When I got back to campus, I had to meet with a disciplinary officer because of underage drinking, and he questioned where I got the alcohol, who I was with, etc. But apart from that, I just followed my usual routine that I was accustomed to. It was the weekend, so I went down to the frat house. I still don't know why, really. I think I was just numb and going through the motions, or maybe I wanted a sense of normalcy. When I got there, all the feelings of sadness turned to anger. As I told them what happened, the people that I half-heartedly expected to be happy to see me were more concerned about what I might have said to the disciplinary officer than the fact that I was alive. They were wrong to do that, for the record, because I covered their asses completely. But I was livid. These people were supposed to be my brothers. How dare they leave me for dead? How dare they lack concern for me when all they really want is to protect themselves? I made an excuse, that I had just wanted to update them but was tired and still recovering, so that I could go back to my dorm. I stewed in anger and resentment for hours. I thought about all the things I had experienced, all the warning signs, and I made a plan. First, I set up a new email account and got the faculty email for the head of the disciplinary committee, a guy who apparently really hated the presence of fraternities on campus housing. I told him I was a student who had information about crimes committed by the members of this particular fraternity and wanted them gone, not just from their house but from the school. I also talked to one of the girls who took me aside in my dorm, one I felt I could trust, and asked if she or anyone she knew had experiences, names, anything. She wasn't willing to step forward personally, but she knew someone who was and helped me get in touch. 3 days later, I met with the committee head at 4 a.m. in someone else's office. I didn't want to be seen because I didn't want anyone to know what was going on or have any heads up. I asked him what he needed to take their house, and he told me. He amended the report I gave to the original disciplinary officer, to include 2 accidental mentions of a particular relatively uncommon alcohol, one this fraternity always uses for their traditional, stupid, ritualistic, fraternity-only drinking events. For what it's worth, that alcohol was actually present, so it wasn't exactly a lie. Apparently just that much was enough for an investigation and wouldn't need me to be involved any more than I already was, which was something I insisted on. The investigation merely being opened was also enough that one anonymous tip-off, say, where certain quantities of certain substances were likely to be hidden within the frat house, was also enough for campus police to come knocking with real police in town, to tear the place apart if enough was found the first time. Remember, the house is owned by the school, so as long as the school gives the police permission to search and they have enough reason to, they're good to go. I also got him in contact with the brave girl who was willing to come forward with her story. I don't know if she ever got real justice, but I do know that one member of the frat suddenly dropped out between the first time I met with the committee head and when the police came. I hope she did. I made myself scarce around the frat house for a month or so with the excuse that I needed to stop drinking. I didn't stop, at least at that point, but I needed some reason for my distance. Even though I wasn't around as often as I once was, I did spend enough time there to put various amounts of hard substances in places that people wouldn't look until the time was right. I've never been a rich guy, so it wasn't much, but pretty much every other room had enough for a minor possession charge thanks to my generosity. When the house eventually got flipped and the substances were found, I dropped out because despite my best attempts to hide it, at that point most of the brothers were keeping me at arm's length and looking at me with suspicion. It was near the end of the semester anyway, and I had gone from doing fairly well in my first semester, to failing most of my classes in the second, so I thought it was probably for the best. I still got to see some of them get dragged out of the house in handcuffs. It was worth it. When it was all said and done, the frat house was essentially raided twice. At least 3 of the brothers dropped out while facing serious possession charges, that I had nothing to do with, those were their stuff, and the rest of them had to separate, moving into other dorms or already scarce off-campus housing, when the fraternity was banned by the school from ever having an official on-campus house for the next decade. Many of them also got minor possession charges on their own or thanks to me. This was almost a decade ago now, and I don't regret it at all, apart from the fact that I didn't do something sooner. Eventually I got help for my mental health and no longer abused substances or alcohol to cope with pain. I also transferred away from that crappy hellhole of a school with just the one good semester on my transcript, though I never did get around to finishing my degree because I spent years in a self-destructive spiral, and all my money on therapy to pull myself out. I just hope what I did made it at least slightly less likely for others to be in danger, one way or another, and that all the people who deserved it got what was coming to them. The pessimist in me doubts it, but I like to think that they did. At the very least, I know that fraternity doesn't have any presence at my former school anymore. Seems like it's kind of hard to get new recruits when you lose the only thing you had going for you, and your already crappy reputation gets worse.
Kidnap my cat? He'll tear you apart. My older sister had this awful, bitchy neighbor who had a serious hard-on for Cecile Point Siamese cat. Her neighbor, CN, was a black-haired, plump, 40-something divorcee who annoyed everyone in the neighborhood. She had zero understanding of boundaries and liked to come over to people's homes, barge in and look around, opening drawers and cabinets and touching their stuff. Once she even went into someone's fridge and grabbed herself a ginger ale, then got mad when the homeowner took it back. If you left your door unlocked for more than 10 minutes, chances were she'd just come right in. She stole yard decorations from other people's yards and had been caught on more than one occasion pocketing something she'd snagged off a mantel or table of a house she'd invaded. She would always throw a tantrum when she got busted. Cops had been called on her many times, but she was good at being pathetic, so most people didn't press charges. Unfortunately, this made her bolder. Basically, she was the entitled beach of the neighborhood. She'd come over to my sister's house without calling, barge her way in and ask to see Sis's cat, telling sister how beautiful he was and how much she wanted a cat just like him. My sister, being rather non-confrontational, would let her see the cat then make her leave. CN was so obsessed with the cat and offered to buy him many times. But my sister loved that cat. He'd been the runt of the litter and rejected by his mom. My sister had taken him and bottle-fed him, mothered him and saved his life. He wasn't a pet, he was her child. So my sister of course always said no. This royally pissed off CN. One day the cat got out, so my sister and I immediately started looking for him. We were checking the bushes and behind the flower pots in her backyard when we heard a very distinctive yowl, followed by a very human shriek of pain, coming from CN's house. Suddenly, the doggy door on CN's back door slams open and out runs my sister's cat, his tail and one rear paw covered in what smelled like hair bleach, dashing past us and into Sis's house. Next thing you know, CN's back door slams open and out she comes, cursing up a blue streak. Ragged claw marks adorned her left cheek and one of her hands had a deep bite wound that had completely saturated one of the gloves she was wearing and had blood running down her hand and arm. Turns out when the cat had gotten out, CN had grabbed him, took him inside, then tried to use hair bleach to bleach the brown out of his tail and paws in order to change his appearance so she could keep him. Unfortunately for her, she didn't know shit about Siamese cats and just how violent they can be. The moment CN put that bleach on that cat's tail, he went absolutely berserk, letting out that yowl of rage we'd heard. He had clawed up CN's face and sunk his fangs deep into her hand. She pushed herself between the bushes my sister used to separate the property line and began yelling. No, not yelling. Shrieking. She shrieked that Sis's cat had wandered into her kitchen while she was cooking, and when she tried to pick him up, he attacked her for no reason. CN then proceeded to call sister the N-word several times and me a effing half-breed SLT. She screamed that my sister was stupid for keeping such a dangerous animal and that my sister would be paying all her medical bills. She then got right in my sister's face and pushed my sister hard in the chest, saying she was calling animal control and intended to have that thing put down. CN opened her mouth to scream some more, but my sister, after hearing that last statement and without one word or warning, hauled off and decked her. She landed on her butt in the grass, now clutching her left eye. My sister then loudly suggested CN go screw herself with a hot curling iron, then ran inside to find her poor cat, while I called the cops. My sister found him hiding in the laundry room and quickly cleaned him off in the sink. Meanwhile, CN is still on her ass in our backyard, howling like a banshee until the cops arrive. I told them what happened and they later talked to my sister, who gave them the same story I did, even admitting to hitting CN, in self-defense of course. It didn't hurt her case that CN had left a bloody handprint on my sister's shirt when she'd shoved her. CN, of course, told them something entirely different. Her story was that she was about to bleach her hair when my sister's cat came in and attacked her. She also said both my sister and I attacked her too. I apparently kicked her in the stomach after my sister punched her, but the cops found no evidence of bruising, and the scratches on her face kind of masked her swelling eye. I also think cops turned a blind eye to it, considering the circumstances, but since there was a clear blood trail leading into CN's open back door, cops felt they had probable cause to go in. The blood trail led to a sink in the first floor bathroom. Blood, cat fur, a bleach applicator and the box it came in were in the sink and on the floor. The cat's collar was in the garbage. CN kept trying to play the victim, but the cops didn't buy it. She got arrested and my sister pressed charges for theft and assault. CN also got nabbed for possession of stolen goods since the cops found a bunch of DVD players and CD players sitting on her coffee table and in the spare room next to her bathroom. She also had a bunch of prescription bottles with other people's names on her kitchen counter. It turned out she'd also been stealing neighbors' painkillers when she'd visited them. And, since she was a renter, The property owner gave her the boot for breach of contract. She went to jail and had to pay for the cat's vet bill. He was okay, but a bit traumatized and had a yellow patch on his butt, paw and tail for several months. CN's hand got infected from the cat bite and it turned out it had also caused permanent tendon and nerve damage as well.
Guys, what's the dumbest thing your girlfriend has ever done? I gifted my girlfriend my old pepper spray after I stopped working as a taxi driver. She got extremely excited by this gift. She felt this extreme empowerment by having it. Like she was invincible. As soon as she got it, she was outside testing it by spraying it on the ground to make sure it works. She used it twice and danced with glee, then we went back inside and that was that. Over the course of the next month, she kept that thing on her like it was her only lifeline to the world. I was honestly kind of flattered that she loved my little $20 gift so much. It comes with a breakaway attachment to a keychain that she had fixed to her keys. We went out downtown and some guy approached her when I was in the bathroom, and when I came out she was pointing it in his face like she's ready to end his retina's existence. It was extremely comical, until it wasn't. So last weekend we were in the car and had some friends with us. My girlfriend in the passenger seat, my friend directly behind her, his girlfriend next to him in the center, and some guy that was introduced to us by my friend, let's call him Steve, directly behind me. We were on our way to an event downtown and this dude Steve has a pretty big personality. You know, the type of guy that likes to put other people down to make himself feel better, or claims to be brutally honest. Well, my girlfriend has a bit of an explosive personality, and while she wasn't the target of his banter, she sure wouldn't put up with it. I was the target. This Steve guy was a fan of dark humor. He made a joke about my dead grandmother who I was extremely close with, and that was enough to set my girlfriend off. She pulled out that handy dandy pepper spray I gifted her and set that right off in his face. Well F. We are in a car on the freeway, windows rolled up, and pepper spray going off adjacently behind me. I appreciate her attempt to white knight for me, but when I tell you everyone in the car was a victim, including herself, to the sheer magnitude of stinging pain to my eyes. They immediately closed and I swerved off the side into the divider. Luckily I only grazed the divider wall, but we were all immediately out of the car, screaming, gasping, wiping our eyes. When I finally looked over at Steve, he was vomiting, beet red, and it literally looked like she dumped the can on his face. She's never getting a weapon again. What is the darkest thing you have ever done and don't regret? When I was 13, my very abusive and extremely intoxicated father was swinging at my dog trying to punch him. I pushed him down a flight of stairs, breaking every rib on his left side and punctured lung. Then I went right back to watching Dukes of Hazzard. About 5 hours later, my mom came home. She asks where Dad was. I told her he was laying on a basement floor. Why? He's intoxicated. Of course he must have fell. She went down there and screamed at him for about 20 minutes. But he was mostly unconscious. Then she called my uncle to come and help me carry him upstairs. My dog wouldn't let my uncle anywhere near the old man, despite their earlier altercation. So I had to carry him up by myself. I was a big kid. Anyone with even a tiny bit of first aid knowledge. Me from Scouts would know not to do that. I had to sling him in a blanket over my shoulder, Santa Claus style. He then spent the next 4 days getting sober enough, not sober, to go to the hospital. There he was, properly diagnosed and treated and his lung drained and reinflated while he was able to smoke. Yeah, smoke right there in his hospital bed. They did not provide alcohol on the hospital menu, so he went into withdrawal, delirium, tremors and all kept screaming, "Get the goddamned horse off of my bed." How did that horse get in here? That lasted about a week then. And I don't know how this works. The doctors refused to release him from the hospital and moved him to the psych ward. He spent 2 months or so in there being treated for addiction. During that time, no children, dogs or wives were physically, mentally or emotionally abused at our house. Not once for the first time in about 30 years. Eventually, he was discharged and much to everyone's shock and utter disbelief. He never drank again or hurt his wife or abused his children. His grandchildren absolutely worshipped him and competed for his favor. He was kind and generous and a great source of wisdom and humor for them. In time, they named their own sons after him and have his name tattooed on their flesh. Ultimately, he died of cancer, and when he did, I held him in my arms and looked him in the eyes so he wouldn't be scared or die alone. I was his primary caregiver for the last 7 years of his life, and I have zero regrets about my actions that day. F with me one more time, I'll unalive you. I am a freshman in high school and I am very large for my age. I am 6'6" and weigh 240 pounds. Despite my scary appearance, I am very shy and quiet, which means I get taken advantage of a lot and bullied by some juniors and seniors. A few weeks ago at lunch, this one a-hole senior Jared was doing his normal stuff, getting all in my face, calling me names. I had not been having a great day, and today I decided I wasn't going to take poop from anybody. So the second Jared put his hands on me, I pushed him, hard. He fell backwards and slid across the floor on his butt. I then walked up to him and leaned down. "If you ever touch me again, I will effing unalive you, hear me?" I threatened. I then turned around and continued eating in silence. There's a small part of me that wants him to F with me. Update, am I the jerk for pressing charges on a former friend for shaving my head in my sleep? A friend of mine just showed me a video yesterday in which my old post had been read. Honestly, I'd nearly forgotten about it since I was only there to ask if I was TA or not. And since I don't want to go through the pain of trying to do an update on Ida, I thought I'd just do it here since entitled spells out Gary pretty well. Other than the shaving incident, he tried to get us to partially pay for his food multiple times by combining the check and dividing it equally when he always got the most expensive thing on the menu, and once even pulled the "I forgot my wallet" bit. He was described as a neckbeard by multiple people, including women he flirted with. He tried to get a married neighbor woman that was older than him to have an affair with her, and then later egged her apartment door when she refused. That one I only learned about a couple months after my original post. And no, Gary never saw consequences for doing that. I also learned he stole several video games and DVDs from friends, mooched food and drink out of their fridges, and even went through a period as a squatter for 2 months by refusing to leave a house he'd been let into by a former tenant, and the landlord actually paid him to leave. Gary's also an extreme hypocrite that contradicted himself more than a corrupt politician. For example, one minute he'd be anti-vax, the next he'd be complaining about other people who weren't getting the virus vaccine. Pretty sure he never got it too. I can't believe I ever had any sympathy for this man. To recap, a former friend of mine named Gary is related to got cancer, and Gary went around trying to get our friend group to all shave their heads. He only got a couple of them to agree, and even brought his shaving kit to my apartment because he just assumed I'd join in as well, and was already unboxing it before I even got the chance to say anything. I told him the shaving was not happening. Well, he decided to make an example of me, and waited till I was good and passed out from drinking at a friend's party. I was so dead to the world that I had to be shaken awake by a friend after Gary got caught shaving my head. He took off one of my eyebrows and messed up my hair beyond saving, and he was laughing his butt off over having done it. So yes, the rest had to come off. I ended up pressing charges on Gary for assault, and found out he's been on meds for a mental disorder for years, and he'd stopped taking the meds, which is one of the reasons he was so loopy. But his tune changed pretty quick when police arrested him since what he'd done qualifies as assault. Gary's family harassed me and tried to make me drop the charges. I not only didn't drop the charges, but I reported the harassment to the police. Only problem is it didn't stop. In fact, it got worse, mainly from Gary's mother, whom I can see where Gary got his charming personality from. She showed up to my apartment a couple of weeks after the shaving incident to scream at me that I knew nothing about what they were going through. And a little hair wasn't a big deal. I told her my hair was a big deal to me, and what Gary did was inexcusable. Well, that earned me a slap on the face, followed by a swift kick to the nuts, followed by a few more kicks to my body after I went down. It was all recorded by a camera that I had watching the front door. Landlord wouldn't let me put in a Ring doorbell cam. One of my neighbors saw her, and screamed at her they'd be calling police. Gary's mom ran, and I ended up going to the hospital with minor injuries, mostly just bruises, a black eye, and a sore groin. Gary's mother got arrested, and I filed a lawsuit against her for attacking me. I saw her in court twice for both her assault on me, and the lawsuit I filed for her assault. This woman had taken several self-defense classes over the years, so she knew how to fight. That had the judge consider her a trained individual, and she was sentenced to 6 months in jail, given 2 years probation, and ordered to pay my medical bills. She actually cried to the judge about the money, but he wasn't having it. It took some time to see her in court again for my lawsuit against her as she was out of jail by then. I was awarded $10,000 for the harassment, emotional damages, and lost work hours, and she had to pay all court and lawyer fees. Which she cried about again because she didn't want to pay anything to the man who'd ruined her and her son's lives. But she had the money for both court cases, because she had no problem paying. But around that time, I heard Gary's relative with cancer passed away. I don't know any details, just that they passed on. I admit that was sad, but I never knew this person. But Gary made their condition his hill to die on when he tried to make an example out of me. Gary got some probation and community service for what he did to my hair, and he cut contact with our entire friend group and eventually moved away. Where to? I don't know. I don't care either. As for my hair, well, it grew back just fine. Took nearly half a year to get it back how it was. My boss had me put out of sight for a while, and I was wearing a hat everywhere for at least a month. I did take that $10K I got in the lawsuit and combined it with my savings for a down payment on a house. So I've since moved into a much better abode. I also have a girlfriend now that's living with me. It was a bit soon for her to move in, but there were extenuating circumstances. We're making it work though, and I'm happy. What's the strangest accidental nudity you've seen? Walked into men's restroom and saw female coworker shaving her vagina. Work has been awkward ever since. Probably should have turned and left, but I waved and walked by her to the stalls. Washing my hands in the IKEA bathroom. Handicap stall door slowly opens, and a woman in sitting on the toilet, on her phone. Doesn't even notice for like 30 seconds. Finally a little girl goes, "Oh no mommy, you need to lock the door," and closes it for her. Funniest thing ever. I was 8 years old. I stayed the night at my friend's house. His mom was a total MILF. We wake up early the next morning and I call my dad to come pick me up because my friend had baseball practice. After he leaves, his mom lets me eat a bagel and wait in the living room for my dad. While I'm waiting, I start looking around at all their cool furniture. They were wealthy, and I'm guessing she forgot I was still there, but his mom left her bedroom door open while she changed to get ready for work. She somehow never saw the wide-eyed 8-yo sitting in her living room groping her softball-sized tits, because she never closed the door. It was amazing as a kid. Never told a soul. A few years back my roommate girlfriend didn't lock the bathroom door. I wanted to go pee early morning and open the door just to see her sit on the toilet half naked, looking at me. I just turned around with a half sleep, haha, okay bye. The breakfast later was kinda awkward. He never found out, I guess. Camping at a family reunion. I'm 9 or so. I'm outside the tent first in the morning. Doing kid stuff, playing in dirt or whatever. My aunt and uncle shared our campsite. I heard sex noises and didn't want to get in trouble, so stayed silent as death. After the fun is over, Auntie pops out of the tent stark naked and walks away. Walks back a couple minutes later and re-enters the tent, didn't see me. Images burned into memory. There are things you can't unsee. What are some unethical life hacks? Give fake money to homeless people. They will thank you for it, but also when they get arrested and taken to jail, it'll reduce the number of homeless people in your area. If you're stuck on an annoying call, put your phone on airplane mode instead of just hanging up. The other person will see call failed instead of call ended. Save business cards of people you don't like. If you ever hit a parked car accidentally, just write sorry on the back and leave it on the windshield. Are the cheapest tickets available for a sporting event. Once inside, check Ticketmaster and StubHub for better seats that didn't sell and go sit there. Buildings washer/dryer model on eBay and order a key for it. I haven't paid for laundry in years and it cost me $8. Sleep like a baby knowing you're not paying for on-site laundry. If the person sitting in front of you on a flight reclines their seat all the way back and leaves you with no room, turn on the air con above you to full blast and point it at the top of their head. In your last year of college, lose your student ID and get a new one. The exp date will reset and you can get another 4 years of discounts. If you're initiating a divorce, secretly arrange consultations with all the best divorce attorneys in your area before choosing one and filing. Once they have met with you, even briefly, they are considered biased and will have to recuse themselves from representing your spouse. If you need to lie about something, include an embarrassing unnecessary detail. After all, why would you intentionally lie to make yourself look bad? If a relative keeps asking you about having kids, lie that the wife is pregnant. A few months later, tell them there was a miscarriage so they'll feel uncomfortable bringing up the subject again. If you have a significant unexplained employment gap that is hurting your resume, claim that you were providing full-time end-of-life care for a grandparent or other older relative. If you decide to adopt kids, tell them that if anyone makes fun of them for being adopted, they should say at least I was wanted. You were probably a mistake and your parents didn't have the heart to tell you. Make your edibles in the shape of dog treats and take them anywhere you want. If a drug dog finds them, his handler will just think he's being a silly boy. Am I the a-hole for calling my stepsister the ugly stepsister because of her overreaction? My, female 29, family jokingly refers to me as Princess/the Princess, because I have a reputation for being opinionated and sensitive. This is mostly because of sensory issues, so certain noises or textures grate on me to an extent that I will leave the room or avoid touching things. I'm also just a picky person and I like things how I like them. So my stepdad started referring to me as the princess, like don't open the car window, the princess will get upset. My stepbrothers and mum use it as well. It's a running family joke, well meant, I've never been offended by it in the 15 years it's been a thing. My stepsister, Georgia, female 30, hates it. She used to snap whenever anyone said it, but over the years she just started making the odd passive-aggressive comment about it. Everyone ignores it, because Georgia has a habit of thinking everything is about her, and if it's not about her, the reason it's not about her is because we all hate her, which then is still about her. So, our whole family is visiting my parents in the countryside for a couple of weeks. Georgia has brought her boyfriend Jason along. I've met Jason a couple of times before at dinners and he's a nice guy, and he's fit in well. This morning, me and my mum were making breakfast and Jason came down to help out. We normally have breakfast in the kitchen/diner, so eventually everyone started gathering at the table. We always make the tea and coffee last so it's hot when we eat, and we had all the mugs out and Jason offered to make the drinks. I told him not to do mine because I liked it in a very particular way, and he said okay princess, I will just watch how you do it so I know for next time, and we laughed. It was a joke. The next thing we know, Georgia shouts she's sick of everyone calling me. She then swore at Jason for being just like them, us. She said since everyone thinks I'm so special, what does that make her? And I replied the ugly stepsister, obviously. No one said anything, but Georgia burst into tears, pushed her plate onto the floor, broke it, and went upstairs, and Jason ran after her. He's since come down to apologize for her, she hasn't come out of her room. My stepbrothers are on my side. The parents say I should have just not said anything and she would have calmed down, and that I went too far picking at insecurity. That might be true, but I'm sick of her making everything about her. The joke doesn't have anything to do with her, and I am, as are my stepbrothers, sick of her acting out to force everyone to behave how she wants them to. Am I the butthole for taking the argument there? Today I effed up by leaving a 3-star review for our engagement photographer. We hired a photographer for our engagement and wedding photos, and after we got our engagement photos realized he wasn't a good fit. We didn't like the photos, he was cagey and uncomfortable and frequently missed meetings. He said he wouldn't give us any refund for the wedding portion of the deposit, close to $3,000, despite it being over a year away and us offering to help transfer our date to a new couple. He was honestly pretty aggressive with me, specifically despite both me and my fiancée talking to him. We agreed that we could move forward with him and look at possible solutions. A month later he emailed saying he had found another couple for our date and wanted to know if we wanted to cancel. We asked if he'd refund us and he still said no, despite the new client. Finally he agreed to give back a few hundred. We left some reviews about our mixed experience, left 3/5 stars, were exceedingly kind about the parts that he did well, nice lighting, but were honest about a lack of communication and him asking to hire a new client without refunding us. A few minutes later I get harassing emails and texts demanding I take down the reviews, claiming I'm ruining his family, etc. We told him the reviews were honest and if he felt we'd been unfair we would edit the reviews. No response. 30 minutes later we are in a random town getting lunch. 2 hours from where we leave, 3 states from where he is. I hear him call my name. He's somehow in this random town and runs down me and my fiancée. He starts threatening us saying we had no right to leave the contract. Not true, he left and also we can leave up to 120 from the wedding. He threatens to sue us and starts yelling in the middle of a crowded plaza. I'm honestly very afraid at this point and just keep trying to escape, walk away. He gets in his car and follows us, saying we will hear from his lawyers. I felt like I was living in a fever dream. He has no legal grounds. But that was still wild. I always felt he had bad vibes. If you get bad vibes from a wedding vendor, run away. I told my girlfriend I would go down on a guy for $1 billion, now she wants to break up. Last night my girlfriend and I were in bed talking about a mutual friend of ours, and his bad luck with women. She went on to say he was so physically unattractive that she wouldn't blow him for $1 billion. I thought this was extreme and told her that he's actually a handsome enough guy, and if she wouldn't do it for $1 billion, I certainly would. Hell, money is money and it would just be a few minutes probably. I'm a guy myself, and know what guys like, so it would be a few minutes of glazing his PP for $1 billion, what fool would turn it down? I was laughing, but now she wasn't. She stared at me and asked if I was serious. I said yes. I told her that's a life-changing amount of money for something people do every day. She sat up and said that nobody who is straight would do that for any amount of money. She asked if I was gay. I said no, but she didn't believe me. She asked if I would give her brother some neck for $1 billion and I said, I'd give my own brother neck for $1 billion. She got angry and went to sleep. I thought that was the end of it, but this morning she told me she didn't want me to be at her place today and she needed time to think. She said she saw a future with me but is worried that I would eventually leave her for a man after years of lying to myself. I tried to convince her that my response was normal, but she wasn't having it. I texted my friend and asked if he would give me some neck for $1 billion. He replied only if I don't have to give you any money. My girlfriend said he's probably gay too and it makes sense that you hang out with him.
What's the most disturbing thing you found out about your partner? My husband and I have been together since our freshman year of high school. He was always rough around the edges and often very intimidating toward our classmates, but he was sweet to me. He proposed and we got married right before my second year of college. He had done a special program with a trade school where you could start courses in high school and finish them later, so he was already working. Our intimate life was great. It was relatively normal, often we would experiment, but never anything that he or I wasn't comfortable with. In November, we found out that I was pregnant. We prepared for the birth ever since, buying all of the necessities and coming up with a name for our daughter. Skip to 2 days ago. My water broke and my contractions started. I was in labor. We were both at home when it happened. Our birth plan was to go to the hospital and get an epidural. The initial contractions were pretty bad, I nearly cried from the pain. I told my husband that I was in labor and to drive me to the hospital, but he refused. He was suddenly against giving birth at the hospital and giving me any kind of pain medication. I was upset, both from the pain and his behavior, so I tried to call my mom to pick me up and drive me. He took my phone and told me to go back and sit on our bed. I felt blindsided. He told me that he wanted to watch me in this state until it was almost time to actually give birth to take me to the hospital. He said that it made him happy to see all the pain that I was going through to bring our child into the world. He kissed my stomach and held it while I was literally writhing and sobbing. He seemed to get more excited whenever the contractions got worse and the pain intensified. Every time I got up to try and leave the room, he would stop me. I even begged him, but he only told me that the begging made him enjoy it even more. I even tried to negotiate to give birth in the bathtub, since I read once that water births were easier than just doing it dry. He refused. I eventually had our daughter. I nearly passed out from giving birth to her and could barely even register that the baby was even there when he placed her on my chest. He was elated, but I was confused, scared, and in pain. There's no doubt that I love her. She's my baby girl. We went with a family name of mine, Ramona. I don't know what to do about my husband. I thought I knew him. Would he try to pull something like this again? I don't think I could ever forget the smile on his face while I gave birth.
What is the most terrifying thing that happened during a Zoom call? A personal social nightmare. During a discussion-heavy class I was taking last year, I had a question that turned into a 2 to 3 minute back and forth with the teacher as they expounded on my question. Just when they were redirecting the convo back to their PowerPoint slides, one of the girls in the class wasn't on mute and someone in their room, I guess their roommate or something, said, "That guy has such an annoying voice," and the girl responded, "I hate hearing him talk. Every time he opens his mouth I'm just waiting for him to shut up." Teacher reminded everyone to mute themselves and the girl got wide-eyed and muted herself. We could see her tell her roommate about it and then laughing, but they didn't apologize or anything. There was just a few moments of silence and then the teacher moved on. I stepped away from my computer for a bit and barely ever said anything the rest of the semester.
Ever been to heaven before? I have. Quick background, when I was younger, I was a very sick child. Constantly in and out of hospital. At 2.5, I contracted pertussis encephalopathy, basically an infection to the brain. I was having seizure after seizure. My siblings were brought in to say goodbye to me before I was being transported to another hospital. They were told they'd never see me again. On the way in the ambulance, my heart stopped 3 times. The third, they thought they'd lost me but managed to bring me back after a few minutes. My parents were told I had a 50-50 chance, but that if I lived, I'd be in a vegetative state. Spoiler alert, I was neither and managed to come out of it absolutely fine. The doctors said they never saw someone come out of what I did. And to this day talk about it when I see them. Now here's where it gets weird. Fast forward to when I'm 3, fully recovered, and we as a family are going through family photos. I point out one of my grandmother, who died years before I was born, and said there's Nanny Collins. My family were shocked because there's no photos of her around the house and had never been shown one. There was no way I knew what she looked like. Curious, they ask me, how do you know that? And I reply, I was up in her house playing with Anne. They ask, my cousin Annie who's my age? I tell them no, not Annie, Anne. At this point they're freaked out. My cousin Annie is named after her aunt and who died when she was a year and a half. There is no way I knew about this because she died 30 years before this incident. Then I said the thing that struck them most. I tell them I was playing with Anne and her toys, but Nanny Collins told me I had to go home to Mummy and Daddy, that I wasn't ready to stay here yet. I truly believe I died, went to whatever kind of afterlife there is, but my grandmother saved me. It explains how I came out of what I did when my chances were literally death or living dead. For a few years. After this I still spoke of my Nanny Collins and told my family that whenever I was sad she would come and cheer me up. I would go to her grave and talk to her like we were having conversations. Then one day, I told them that she said I didn't need her anymore, and after that day I never spoke of her again. I truly believe my nanny was there for me through my tough childhood years. I sadly don't remember these things because I suspect she stopped showing to me when I was old enough to remember. I wish I did remember, but all my family members do. Even my aunts and uncles talk about this and how I spoke about her all the time. Nanny Collins, thank you for saving my life.
Redditors who grew up with strict parents, what was the most absurd rule you had to live by? I once got grounded because I did the dishes without having to be reminded. My mom said that I was trying to manipulate her and that I must have only done it because I was trying to get something out of her. In reality, all I really wanted out of her was to stop yelling at me about how I never do the dishes without having to be reminded. I was not allowed to use the money cheat on Sims growing up because that's not how the real world works. I used the cheat once and couldn't explain where all the money I had came from, so I was grounded and had Sims taken away. Nobody in my house was allowed to get the mail except my dad. Doesn't matter what time he got home, leave the mail in the mailbox. He would also personally open all the mail no matter the recipient. He would always know if anyone touched it. After I turned 9 years old I wasn't allowed to watch cartoons anymore. I hated my dad for it. I wasn't allowed to leave my room. I could go to the bathroom or kitchen, but I better have a reason to be there.
What's something a teacher said or did to you at school that still makes you mad? I had a really bad accident at the end of 2004 when I was in year 11 at school. I was electrocuted by an alarm clock, became part of the electrical circuit, attached to house voltage, and almost passed away. I had monitors attached to my heart and brain for over 24 hours and needed extensive surgery on my hands due to the electric burns, resulting in nerve damage and skin grafts. My left hand, where the exit wounds are, was worse than my right, but I had to go through intense physiotherapy to learn to use my hands again. I couldn't grasp anything, which meant no writing in school. Most of the teachers were really understanding about this and would print me out some notes or photocopy my friends' notes for me to make sure I didn't fall behind, seeing as I was still unable to write in 2005, which was my graduating year at school. Hell, even teachers I didn't know and admin staff were always stopping me and asking if I was okay and needed any help or any assistance. When my dad and I went to the parent/teacher interviews, my drama teacher told my dad that she felt as though I was faking or exaggerating my pain and injuries to get out of doing schoolwork and that I needed to start pushing myself. Seeing as it was my dad who saved my life and disconnected me from the circuit that had held me, this really pissed him off. He asked her, have you ever been electrocuted? Her, well no, but, Dad, well I have been, and it was nowhere near to the degree that Kitty was, but I can tell you that you can feel yourself burning from the inside out and it's incredibly painful. Her, I understand that, but, Dad, has she missed handing in any assignments? Her, no, but, Dad, then what's the problem? I was there while she was being electrocuted, in the ER, spoke to numerous medical professionals who all said she'd probably suffer lifelong pain because of this accident. I was there when she woke from surgery, when the surgeon came to check on her and explained that the skin grafts could take months to take and that they may even be rejected by her body and that she needed to be attentive to them. I've also been to multiple appointments with her physio where they've told her she needs to take her time and listen to her body, because pushing the limits could result in huge setbacks. I assure you, her pain is real, and she refuses pain meds, because she doesn't want to rely on them to get her through or be dependent on them for life. I think she's doing bloody awesome, and so it seems do all of her other teachers, who we've spoken with this evening. So Mrs. Drama Teacher, why don't you just stick to what you know, teaching drama, and we'll continue to take medical and health advice from the professionals.
My boyfriend says he will break up with me if I don't give him a baby within the year. We have always been on the same page about not wanting children since we started dating 4 years ago. We have been happily dating since then, and I have truly felt like I had found my soulmate. We haven't talked about having children again, and so I assumed nothing had changed. Until yesterday. We were on a crowded bus in the middle of the city center on our way to meet his mom and sister when he said that we have to get off. When we got off, he said that he had something to tell me. He starts crying, saying that he has realized that he wants children and can't imagine a future without having at least one, that it has become more important to him than being with me, and that we have to break up if I don't change my mind. I was really shocked. I had no idea he had been having these thoughts, but apparently he has been thinking about this for several months. I feel so betrayed that he didn't include me earlier on his thoughts, and that it has gone so far that he wants to break up basically right away if I don't say yes. We don't even live together yet. The last year we have spent hunting for apartments, and we are not financially stable enough. Never mind even considering having a baby, which he now says he needs within a year. I told him that I don't want a baby right now, and that giving me this weird ultimatum from out of nowhere is really unfair because he has had a lot of time to think about this. I haven't. I don't feel good about making the decision to have one under these circumstances either, because to some extent, it would be out of fear of losing him. Mother-in-law rearranged my entire house, so I cleaned her house. My husband and I have been married a long time, but his mother hates me. I've been low to no contact for probably the last 10 years and my life has been divine because of that. Husband doesn't mind because he gets lots of romance when his ma isn't interfering in our relationship. But way back, I tried so hard to get on her good side. I was such a sweet summer child. I thought to myself she should be happy for husband. I cooked and cleaned and threw parties and most people liked me. But she was sly, so husband didn't catch the nuances of her behavior. I tried to point it out, with little luck, because I had no experience with a woman like this. We left for our honeymoon a week after our wedding, enough time for us to set up our small apartment and get cozy living together beforehand. We left for a week with the keys left to mother-in-law to fetch our mail and various things. When we got back she had completely rearranged my kitchen, the living room, threw out some of my pictures and knickknacks from our bedroom, and I swear she also tossed some of my lingerie. I was upset, so upset and cried to husband. He, angry at his mom, talked to her then came home with the usual, can you guess it? She can't imagine why I'd be upset. She was being so helpful. She didn't mean to do anything wrong, and the tears came at her bidding so that husband was thrown for a loop, never having experienced woman-to-woman territorial stomps. He came home spewing her diatribe and simply told me that he would help me put things back. And he did, except for the kitchen. He only made things worse in there but not for lack of trying. Mother-in-law never even taught him to butter bread. She believed the man had to be the breadwinner and the woman had to stay home to clean the house, make the man food, and keep the babies healthy. She's even intruded on our intimate relationship, asking when we were going to give her grandbabies. But I learned a valuable lesson. Whenever mother-in-law was up to her shenanigans, she would wait until we were alone, look at me and do this evil smile with a nod to acknowledge her disdain for me properly. I learned from the best, the very best. Mother-in-law was the town pillar, active in church and charity, and so sweet to the people she approved of. So, here is the meat of this post. Mother-in-law is old now, and still just as sneaky. If anything, old age has sharpened her skills, and she has taken on the role of helpless old lady quite fabulously. There are volunteers who help her and bring her meals, sit and read with her. It's all quite nice, really. She did a week-long stint in the hospital recently, and husband got the key to her house to retrieve her mail, etc. Well, I made a copy of said key without husband knowing because I had a plan. During that week, I took some time off work, I was so sick, don't you know, and let myself into her house to rearrange, clean her kitchen. I also threw away some broken porcelain and other items because they weren't necessary, took pictures off the walls and put them in the closet. Then I rearranged the linen closet, the coat closet, mother-in-law's closet and her bathrooms. Both of them. I left the living room mostly alone, sadly, but I didn't want husband to catch on. Then, on the day husband was supposed to pick her up from the hospital and bring her home, I offered to help husband clean her house for her homecoming. He was mildly surprised at my offer but I said I've decided to let bygones be bygones. I will help, then get out of the way so husband could help mother-in-law get settled in. She can mostly live by herself, with a little help every day from Itsna and Hubs to check in on her. So we cleaned, mopped, and vacuumed. Got everything sparkly and clean. I went with husband to fetch his mom and sat in the back seat. When we arrived, mother-in-law immediately noticed things were askew but she couldn't tell what it was yet. Then she noticed the missing pictures. Mother-in-law. What did you do with my pictures? Husband and me. What do you mean? Mother-in-law, you stole my pictures. Me, oh my, no mother-in-law, I helped husband clean and that's all. Husband confirmed that is all I did. I asked if she'd like some tea, and she yelled at me to stay out of her kitchen. She went in herself and screamed, what had we done? I looked at husband all puzzled and husband repeated that he and I only cleaned the counters and dishes, and mopped. Mother-in-law was livid, so I told husband that my presence must be upsetting to her, so maybe I should leave. Husband was confused because he had no idea why his mom was acting so outwardly hostile to me and agreed. So I cheerfully told mother-in-law that I'd be on my way and husband could call me when he's ready to be picked up. That's all husband heard. He didn't see me smile at mother-in-law because he was facing my back. And you all, I nodded at her with her very own signature nod. She was livid. Husband told me on the way home hours later that she had accused me of all sorts of things, and that's when I said the poor dear's mind must be going. He agrees, the poor thing is getting so old, after all. She should have been nicer to me. I get to help pick her nursing home, and I know very well how to play the helpful supportive role. Thanks mother-in-law. My sister didn't care I had pneumonia and forced me to participate in her wedding. 10 years later, talking about her wedding became her nightmare. My sister has always been a fairly vain person. She was a cheerleader, homecoming court, and beauty pageant candidate. My mom always supported her in all these endeavors, and it was clear that my sister was her favorite child. So my sister finally met a great guy, and we were engaged for 8 months of dating and quickly married. At first, people raised eyebrows at each other knowingly, but I think my sister just wanted him locked down as soon as possible. He is genuinely nice and could have done much better than my sister. His family has money. It's not ridiculous, it is still middle class but upper middle class. My family was duct tape on the shoes, coupon, and store brand level of class, so my sister was living it up in her planning, including renting a huge reception hall that was a ski lodge in February, in Utah. So there's snow everywhere. She expected her bridesmaids to wear cap-sleeve satin dresses with no jackets, and to stand outside in the cold for an hour while the ceremony happened inside the Mormon temple that is closed off to all but the parents of the couple for secret rites and oaths. About 2 weeks before the wedding, poor 13-year-old me started coughing. It progressed to high fevers, body aches, fatigue, and vomiting. We went to the doctor, who told my parents I had the flu and a bad case. It didn't get better in a week, and a second visit the day before we were to drive to Utah had the doctor telling them I was developing pneumonia. The doctor looked shocked when my mom asked if I'd be better by the ceremony in a few days. He said taking me to an even colder climate my body wasn't used to was a bad idea. My mom, in mother of the bride mode, said there was no choice. The doctor wrote a prescription and said it was going in my record that they were going against medical advice. I don't remember much about the next week, but I've heard all about it multiple times. The highlights include my sister pitching a scream at the top of her lungs when she was told I was sick. She was convinced I did it to ruin her day. She would try to force me out of bed multiple times to help with reception preparation. I threw up at some point, and she flipped out but continued to try to force me out of bed. She finally relented as long as I did the family photos. I look like death in them. She tried to force makeup on me to hide that I was pale with sunken eyes. The makeup artist thought she was insane and refused because I would cough directly in her face if she did. Sister was mad and said she would have to pay to edit all the photos later. At the reception, yes, she made me go, and nobody stopped her. I hid under a table to sleep but couldn't stop coughing, and she told her new brother-in-law to haul me out and to tell me to stop acting like a child. He refused and said he was driving me back to the hotel so I could sleep. She was making everyone uncomfortable by forcing a very sick kid to attend her reception and forcing people to be around me. He stopped and bought me hot chocolate and Gatorade on the way back, which I threw up but was a nice gesture. My dad ended up taking me to an emergency clinic early the next morning because I was so dehydrated and couldn't keep anything down. I got sent to the hospital and admitted. I think that was when my sister realized just how bad it was and ended up apologizing a few weeks later. But even now, over 10 years later, she has trouble talking about the wedding without people bringing up how insane she was acting. Just knowing how she treated me while I was sick makes me wonder how awful she treated everyone else, but nobody likes talking about it.
My climate change activist husband spent all my money on a new Tesla to save the environment, and now I'm struggling to pay for my daughter's education. Me and my husband met in college. I was pursuing an incredibly academically rigorous route to become a lawyer, whereas my husband was getting his degree in environmental sciences. My husband and I really connected as people, and so we got married soon after college. Only a year later I got pregnant with our first daughter. I love nothing more than our daughter, but I also am a really career-oriented person, so after her we haven't tried to have any more kids. My husband, on the other hand, said that he wanted to be a stay-at-home dad. This arrangement worked really well for us, and it made our life really convenient. Up until this year when I got my huge salary raise, but it also came with more work hours. Now I would barely see my husband and daughter as much, and most of our conversations were about climate change, because my husband was absolutely fascinated by it. Now, one thing that's important is that we invest most of my money into our daughter's education because she goes to a very expensive private school. My husband during this period of time said that he wanted to make some minor changes to our lifestyle, so that we could be a lot more environmentally friendly. Of course I had no problem with that, and was always looking to help out my community. However, when this type of behavior starts to interfere drastically with my lifestyle, that's when I have an issue with it. At first it was just switching to reusing more of our stuff, and buying second-hand clothing, then it turned to buying more eco-friendly products. Then my husband started volunteering. Now again, I have nothing wrong with pitching in to help the community, but this was totally messing up my schedule, and our daughter was now consistently getting picked up late from school. I tried to talk to my husband about this, but he just started to say, "Oh, I'm sorry for trying to help save the planet. Do you know how many animals and habitats are destroyed by the actions of people like you?" I let it drop because obviously I was glad that my husband found something that he was passionate about, and in the end we developed a much better system for taking care of our child. Later that week is when the second incident happened. My daughter called me from her dad's phone and started complaining about how dad was making her take cold showers. I asked her to pass the phone to him, and demanded he explain himself. He said that hot water was not a very eco-friendly thing and it was overall beneficial for the family to start taking cold showers. I said that there was absolutely no way that the whole family would be taking cold showers, and that if he wanted to he could, but neither me or my daughter would. Me and my husband weren't communicating that much at this point, and because of my terrible schedule now, which happened because my husband wanted to do more activism, now I have to pick up my daughter. Not to mention the crazy long work days I would barely get to see my husband. I had to keep on funding his desire to be an activist, and let's just say it wasn't cheap. One day while I was at the office I saw a huge deduction on our bank account. I immediately contacted the bank and tried to report some sort of fraud, but they informed me that it was my husband who had made a car purchase. When I got home I saw a brand new white Tesla sitting in our driveway and my husband was doing a photoshoot for it. I couldn't believe it and immediately started questioning him about what this was. I was in so much shock that he did something this big without telling me. Considering I was the main breadwinner of the family, and I paid for it. My husband couldn't stop talking the whole night about how good of an investment this was. He was on his phone posting on his Reddit and Facebook about his new car to all his eco-friendly groups. As I was frantically looking over our bank statements, I realized that this put us in a terrible financial situation. We already paid more than 5 figures yearly for our child's education, and this on top of that could really put us in a bad situation. I confronted my husband about this. While we were all getting in bed, I told him that either he gets a job today and pays back what he owes, or else I'm divorcing him and selling the Tesla. What he did next was crazy.
I did not allow my brother's fiancée to walk in with him at my wedding. I'm getting married in 2 months. We're having an intimate, low-key reception, and the wedding party will be my soon-to-be sister-in-law and my brother. During the family introduction component, where each family member is announced, I'd have my brother and sister-in-law walk in first, then my in-laws, then my parents, and then us. Well, in a passing convo, I mentioned this to my brother's fiancée, and she was like, well, the right thing to do is have me walk in with your brother since he's my fiancé, and I responded that he'd be walking in with my sister-in-law because that's the pairing, and I don't want her to walk in alone. My brother's fiancé complained to my brother, and my brother is saying it's rude of me not to include his fiancée and that I should respect their relationship and announce them as an engaged couple at my wedding. I was furious and told my brother that would not be happening, and now he's threatening to not attend my wedding if he doesn't get to walk in with his fiancée. He and his fiancée also claim that I'm being insulting and that it's unconventional for me to pair my brother with my sister-in-law. My brother's fiancée and I have never really gotten along, but for my love for my brother, I try to see the best in her even though she constantly lies and betrays my trust. I was willing to let her walk in with my brother and sister-in-law, even though she was not a part of the wedding party. But they both said no and claimed it was my responsibility to announce their engagement at my wedding. My dad's on my brother's side and said I should just do what he says. My mom's on mine since she knows how much my brother's fiancée lies and loves to cause drama. Am I in the wrong here?
What do you do when your spouse wants a divorce and you don't? Shortly after our 20th anniversary, my then husband, out of the blue, to me, announced he didn't want to be married anymore. I was devastated. I cried. I slept. I cried some more. After a few weeks, I realized I had to get it together. I was 42 years old and a full-time volunteer for an international nonprofit, so I didn't have an income. I moved to Nashville and got a newly created position with the nonprofit where I'd been a high-level volunteer for over a decade. Ironically, and prior to the ex's pronouncement, I was in the meeting where the position was created. The ideal candidate, the executive director said, would be in her late 30s or early 40s, would have extensive knowledge of the organization, and would be free to travel extensively. My comment was, good luck finding someone without a life. I also said if they wanted someone who could really embrace the position and accomplish the organization's goals, they'd have to pay her more than the typical staff salary. Little did I know I was negotiating my own future salary. I started the position and hit the road running. In 5 semesters, I visited close to 100 colleges and universities across North America. I left that position to return to corporate America, and, once there, began to date. It was awful. I couldn't go on a date without crying. It'd been 3 years, yet I was not over it. I finally found a therapist who helped me walk through the pain and come out on the other side. After another couple of years, I met my current husband, and we married 6 months later. That was 21 years ago. As it turns out, as painful as it was, the ex did me a favor by giving me the opportunity to find my current husband, who is a much better fit for me. After our divorce, the ex married twice and divorced once. Oh, well. Caught my husband cheating. Can our marriage be saved? My husband and I have been together for 5 years and married for 2. We are both 24. He makes $60K and I'm in school and make $15K. We live in our own 2-bedroom apartment right near his work. I'm currently pregnant with our first baby. Keep in mind I'm a very devoted wife. I make him dinner every night, I clean the house, do his laundry and iron his work clothes. I also buy him a gift on his birthday, Valentine's and his anniversary. We are very happy and I never thought he would cheat. Yesterday, I came home from school and saw that my keys didn't work, so I knocked. My husband opened the door, looking very flustered and said I'm really sorry I have a headache and will be sleeping in the guest bedroom for the night, which was strange but whatever. He squeezed my waist then went back in the bedroom. I went to the guest bedroom and crashed. I was woken up to my husband screaming and crying in his sleep and I felt bad. But he calmed down, then woke up and wanted to cuddle. I found it odd that he wanted to cuddle because he's kind of a manly man and doesn't normally do that. I asked him what was wrong and he brushed it off and went to work. No red flags up yet. Later that night I started going through his phone. Now, I know this is a nasty thing to do and I feel extremely guilty, but I discovered several raunchy text messages from 4 different women, including my grandma's friend and even my own grandma. In the texts he'd tell the women that he wished they were with him, that he was so glad he cheated and his relationship was nowhere near as bad as he's made it out to be. He's even called my grandma baby and made multiple references like, I know you love occupying my space, which implied intimate intercourse, and he would constantly compare my amazing, SXY, loving attitude with these girls, calling me frigid and boring. These girls had no shame. They were even sending pics to him and making comments like I'm sucking on a lollipop right now because I know you love it, and a comment he sent back was, oh that's just cruel, now my dinner's ruined. One of the girls even said she was trying to ruin our marriage and as soon as he told her I was pregnant he would be leaving. I know I'm only months pregnant but I'd always dreamed of being a stay-at-home mom and never going to work to earn money. The last message I'm absolutely sure was from the owner of a local bar we sometimes hang out at, because he once said to my husband the drinks are on the owner, just walk up to the bar, put your hand on your chest and say V's bill is coming, and walk away. He said the owner enjoyed hearing that. I discovered all this evidence then deleted it, deleted the app, and went to bed crying. I honestly don't know what to do. Although I am very hurt, I kind of expected him to cheat. My last 2 relationships ended after I spent several years dedicating myself to them. I don't want to stay in the marriage for any other reasons besides the kids. My family's happy for us, and as I'm put into the mix of things, it won't be easy to divorce him. I'm just not sure if I can trust him anymore. I love him so much, even the faults. He's the first boy I ever kissed and the only person I've ever slept with, and I just want to repair our marriage and be happy again. But I've spent my last 4 nights crying alone in the guest bedroom, so right now it doesn't seem like he even cares.
Chauffeurs who drive around rich people, what are some of the weird, shocking conversations you have overheard? I once worked at a really exclusive club in Massachusetts, the kind you have to be born into and or of generational wealth to be voted into membership by the board. 1. Drew Barrymore was a frequent guest, and there was always a lot of tension between her and her ex, who always came with his extremely young new GF wife. She wasn't super friendly, no one was supposed to acknowledge they recognized her, seemed constantly stressed, and I felt kind of bad for her. Didn't seem like a fun life. Mitt Romney, Morgan Freeman, and a bunch of big-time athletes were also frequent guests. 2. Someone got married at our club and spent over $2 million on the wedding. They flew out the event planners for Coachella to design every aspect of the wedding. It was a spectacular wedding and one of the most fun nights I've ever had. However, at the end of the night, the front desk saw the groom go home with one of the bridesmaids instead of the bride. 3. So many wealthy kids with rich kid problems and wildly different upbringings. Parents would constantly talk and quiz their kids on politics, history, science, etc. One group of guys was challenging their teenage sons to come up with a business idea. The boy with the best idea would receive $1 million for startup costs. Kids talked stocks constantly at the dinner table. Teenagers would come to eat with their friends, drink, and drop a casual $15,000 bill on their parents' tab. Just such a stark contrast from the way I was raised, where money was a taboo topic and my weekly $2 allowance for a week's worth of chores made me feel rich.
Am I the a-hole for disowning my wife's daughter after she chose her mom's affair partner over me? I met my now soon-to-be ex-wife during uni 12 years ago. She already had a kid when she was 19, but the dad left as soon as she started uni. We were dating for 3 months before I met her daughter Lisa. I remember seeing her family for the first time. I was nervous about meeting her parents, but when I saw a little girl beside her mom I was confused. I asked her if that was her little sister or a cousin of hers, and her answer shocked me. When she told me that that's her daughter, I thought I misheard her or something. At first I wanted to dump her for hiding something so crucial from me, but she kept on begging for me to stay, and eventually, I relented, and soon enough I started to fall in love with her daughter and wanted to be her father figure. Our bond grew stronger over the years, and in early 2019, before the pandemic hit, we got married. In late 2021 I adopted Lisa, and in early 2022 my wife gave birth to our son Mark. After my son was born, my wife chose to stay at home for the time being, and I was completely fine with that. Everything was going perfectly until a few months ago. I started noticing my wife increasingly spending time with her friends. At the time, I didn't say anything since, in my mind, being at home all day probably meant eating at her, and I didn't want to seem controlling. The thing that made me suspicious was her constant texting and going out of the room for calls. She never did that for anyone besides this one friend of hers. I asked her about it, but she gave me some vague answers about gossip. The moment that took it too far, though, was when I came home last week and saw her outside talking on the phone. This wasn't out of the ordinary. I remember seeing my son on the floor crying alone. I was pissed at my wife for just leaving him alone in the house, but when I went to pick him up and smelt the horrible stench coming from him, I was beyond furious. His diaper seemed like it hadn't been changed since that morning. I quickly changed his diaper and rushed outside with him in my arms. I was beyond pissed. I snatched her phone from her hand and bolted back inside. I locked my wife outside to talk with this friend of hers alone. I had my suspicions about who it was, and when I heard a male voice calling out her name and asking who was there, I immediately knew what was going on. He ended the call as soon as he heard my voice. I then proceeded to lock the front door to make sure my wife couldn't enter the house at all, and proceeded to screenshot as much of their chat as I could and then sent them to myself before deleting them on her phone. About 5 minutes later, she was still banging on the glass door leading to the backyard. I reluctantly opened it and was met with a smack in the face. Remember, all of this is happening while I'm holding my toddler in my arms. As soon as she realized what she just did, she apologized profusely, started crying and tried to hug me. I pushed her away and told her to meet me at the dining table. I told my daughter to quickly take care of the baby so me and her mom could have a quick chat. I just kept it simple. I told her this was her only chance to even have a sliver of chance of getting me back. If she fucked up this talk, it was over on the spot. No lies, nothing. She kept on trying to apologize and to say it wasn't that serious. I reminded her that she not only fucked me over, she could also have easily done serious harm to our son by leaving him alone in the house like that. I then simply asked who, for how long, and did they fuck? She replied with her ex-boss Daniel. 6 months, and she didn't answer the last one, so I kept on reminding her that this was her last chance. She then just simply nodded. I then asked her if they used protection. To this, she started crying and started begging me for forgiveness. She said she would block him then and there, and would never contact him again. I could fuck any woman I want from now on, yada yada. I guess Lisa heard the commotion and came downstairs. I told her to go back up, but she just walked to my wife and asked her if I knew about Daniel. Up to this point I was calm, but upon hearing this, I swear even I started tearing up. I asked Lisa if she knew all along, and she said yes. At this point I'm full on crying, and I asked her why she didn't tell me. She responded with, because unlike you, Daniel buys me the things I want without having to beg. I then asked her how she could possibly do this to her dad. She responded with the "you're not my real dad" crap. My wife screamed at her upon hearing what she said. At that point I couldn't bear any of this anymore. I just grabbed my son and got into the car. Me and my son are currently staying at my parents' house. I've basically been drinking myself to sleep every day. Thanks to the saint of a mother I have, my son is being taken care of right now. I'm beyond hurt. I've canceled my ex-daughter's private school tuition, all her extracurricular activities, and I've contacted a divorce lawyer. He's going to serve my wife this Friday. My wife and Lisa have been blowing up my phone non-stop with apologies. I simply responded with, get a lawyer and tell that ungrateful thing of yours to start calling Daniel her dad. I'm disowning her, and then I blocked my wife. I didn't respond to Lisa, I just simply blocked her. I guess my wife told our friends what her and Lisa did, and now they have been texting me non-stop. They understand how I feel but believe I'm going too far by divorcing my wife without hearing her out. They also keep telling me that disowning Lisa is definitely going too far and she's only a kid and didn't understand what she was doing. I just can't get over the things she told me. I've worked my ass off to give my wife and daughter luxuries I could have only dreamed of as a kid, and this is how I get paid back? Lisa is old enough to understand that. Hiding her mom's affair is bad and definitely purposely used those words to hurt me. But a part of me believes that there is still hope. A few family counseling sessions later and we can go back to living the life I once considered a fairy tale. I'm beyond destroyed by this whole situation. A part of me just wants to see them burn in hell, but the other part of me believes there is still hope. You emotionally cheated and I'm okay with it. What's done is done. So my wife and I became super unhappy in our marriage. Mainly because I felt like a failure in life and didn't feel like I was the man she deserved, and we both buried ourselves in different habits when we were unhappy. I smoked a lot of WD to keep myself distracted from how unhappy I was, and she buried herself in online friendships. When I finally started to come out of the unhappiness, the damage was done. I thought we could work on it, and I doubled down with trying to make it work and get back to us. She still felt distant and it felt like there was someone else. I started driving myself crazy because the signs were there, needing sudden phone privacy and other things locked behind passwords that made no sense to me. We decided to separate and work on ourselves, and mainly because I knew I was going to drive her away with my constant overanalyzing of her actions and mine. I told her I felt like there was someone else either physically or emotionally, and she guaranteed me it was all in my head and I was just being mopey and clingy. Fast forward 2 years later during the separation, and ooh and behold, I found proof there was someone else emotionally. We finally talked and she admitted to it, because when we separated the guy wanted more than she did. For 2 years I've questioned everything about myself because I felt I was at war with my gut and my brain. I've told her now it feels she's just bouncing in and out of online relationships. Honestly, I don't blame her for the situation, but even as unhappy as I was, I pulled myself out of any situation to where I thought I would even entertain the idea of an emotional or physical cheat. I think deep down I've already forgiven her for what's lost, because what's done is done. And now I just feel I need to forgive myself for the last 2 years of questioning and fighting with myself because I didn't want to listen. I don't want advice. I do still love her and I don't want to punish her. I just wanted to get this off my chest. What happened to the smartest kid in your school? The smartest kid in my school was a social outcast. He was a senior and was frequently made fun of for being openly gay and still having his V card. People made fun of him and called him a nerd, but this dude was dang smart. A photographic memory and played instruments unbelievable. He literally posted a video online of him strapped to a chair, hanging upside down as the chair was mounted to some platform, perfectly playing the piano. Kid was a genius, but no amount of genius saved him from his bullies. He would frequently get hurt a lot in school. It all ended very tragically for him. He was only a few days away from his 18th birthday and our senior exams were coming up. One day while we were at school, the school had a shutdown and we were all evacuated and saw the police come in. They found his body in the toilets. A group of 5 bullies ganged up on him. They hurt him until he passed away. The kid had asthma and during the wailing, he passed away. It was reported that he was trying to reach for his inhaler after the wailing ended and one of the kids took it and tossed it out of the bathroom window. They just left him there to pass away. It was devastating. The people doing it were all 17. Part 1. The 18-year-old was sentenced to prison while the others did a few measly years in juvie. I'll never forget the strength of the nerd's mother. She came to the school the next day and spoke during an assembly. Her speech made me cry. She cried during it. It was a roughly 1-hour rant about how disgusting the students who did this were and shared her favorite memories with her son. The funeral was held a week later, and it was the most tragic thing I had ever been to. I finally stood up to my father's misogynistic friend. Years ago, my dad met Harold through mutual friends, and they hit it off. I was 18 and in college when I met him, and we never had a close relationship. However, he always seemed to think of himself as a family friend, and was extremely infantilizing and condescending towards me. Every time I saw him, I'd try to tell myself it wasn't that bad, only for him to prove me wrong less than a minute later. Harold would disrespect my boundaries, say things like "you're not 19, you're a baby," while I was talking to other people, and patronize me, my education or my hobbies whenever he had the chance. He always noticed that annoyed me, to which he'd playfully ask if I hated him. I always said no, but only for my father's sake. The final straw came the day Harold interrupted a barbecue to say, "I really like you, even though you're an impolite brat." I was 20 years old. I'd been quiet all day, working on a paper during the barbecue, but replied patiently and politely whenever anyone addressed me. And even if that hadn't been the case, I knew he didn't have the right to talk to me like that. After that, I started making an effort to avoid any events I knew he'd be attending. Yesterday was my father's girlfriend's birthday. They threw a small lunch party at my dad's apartment. I went there with my fiancée and our 6-month-old son. Harold was there. I hadn't seen him in months, but he still talked to me as if I was a dumb child. Never mind that I'm engaged, a mother, and 26 years old. I spent the whole party ignoring his helpful advice about me being too young to get married or be a mom. It helped that most of the other guests seemed to disagree with him. My baby spent most of the afternoon sleeping. He woke up hungry, so I went to feed him and excused myself from the party for a while. I got back to jokes and comments, all from Harold, about how I was probably struggling if my son was managing to leech me away for so long. He went on to interrupt a conversation I was having with another of my dad's friends to question pretty much everything about my parenting. He doesn't even have custody of his daughter, by the way, and to make more comments about my age. I decided I couldn't take it anymore after he asked if I'd thought about giving my baby up for adoption. I got my son and told my fiancée we were leaving. We said goodbye to everyone except Harold. When we got to the door, Harold came to ask why we were leaving. I tried to make up an excuse, but he kept trying to make us stay. After a small back and forth, he jokingly asked if I hated him. And this time, I said, yes. I do. Can we go now? He didn't say anything, and we left. On the way home, my fiancé said he was proud of me. My father called this morning to say the opposite, and we had a small fight, but ultimately decided to drop the subject. I'm sure this isn't over, but if it keeps going, it won't be because of me. My girlfriend is a psychic and it's scaring me. I think she's going to use her power to predict when I break up with her. I have known my girlfriend for around 7 years and she has always been a bit odd. Not in a bad way, but she's very empathetic and too kind for her own good. She also has chronic depression/anxiety and BPD. A few months into us dating she would do this thing where she would text me to hydrate/eat/stretch/relax my muscles. I didn't think much of it honestly, like those are very common things people forget to do. Then she got more specific, example being hey pop your left shoulder or it'll start to hurt later tonight, or she would buy me foods I was craving without me asking, or send me reassurance when I was feeling low. Even those however I was able to brush off with ease, like what nearly 30-year-old doesn't have aches and pains, you know? It was like that for months and occasionally I'd ask her how she knew I hadn't hydrated all day or how she knew I wanted one of my cravings, to which she would always respond with it's a gift, cool huh? I figured she was bluffing and kept getting lucky. Now I don't think that's the case. Last week she called off work and rushed over. I asked her why she felt the need to do that and she said she felt compelled. An hour later we got the news a family member I was close to passed. Here I have to note, she is close with my parents but they don't talk outside of family gatherings, so there's no way she would have known prior to the call. She stayed by my side the rest of the week and confided in me that she was a different religion than I am. She's a Hellenistic pagan, and I'm a Baptist, and that she got the urge to call off work when she was cleaning up her altar. I was a bit shaken up but ultimately I was just glad she was there with me. This weekend we went to visit her dad. She suggested it because he lives outside of a tourist trap town and we could use the vacation. I agreed and it was a fantastic trip. On the ride there, she confessed she doesn't like my job because it's dangerous. It wouldn't be and I don't think it is at any of the other shops, but we simply don't have the equipment to do what we claim we can, so we have to jerry-rig quite a bit. I explained this to her and she just reiterated she wants me to be careful. I promised I would be and she dropped it. I had tried my best to not tell her about how sketchy it gets sometimes or that we actually had a workplace incident recently, but the way she talked, it felt like she knew. Throughout the drive from her dad's to the town, the drive was anxiety-inducing. We were talking about heavy rain, plus bad drivers, and my car was acting up, yet my usually anxious girlfriend with car wreck trauma was unfazed. When I inquired about it at dinner she said she knew we wouldn't wreck it. I asked how she could possibly know that, and she said I have a gift and I should just trust her on this. It was hard, but I did my best. When I was dropping her off, she warned me to be on the lookout for deer and to drive safely. Two somewhat normal statements given where we live, but I didn't think it meant hey there's gonna be a deer in the middle of the road so don't hit it. It was just the icing on the cake, and I still don't get this gift. The next morning, she's gushing about how much she liked our weekend and how much she loved spending time with me, how we need to do it again blah blah blah. She then mentions how I need to be careful on the drive there. Lo and behold there was a wreck on my commute. I got to witness it. At lunch she asks if I'm okay, which I kind of had just gotten a cut on my arm. I'm a mechanic so it's common. I asked her if she could stop being so weird and to just chill because life is being weird and I'm not feeling it. She said okay, but how do you think I feel? I'm just stuck like this. I apologized and she agreed she would chill, and told me she didn't mean to scare me but now I'm super weirded out by her. What are you still salty about years later? Growing up, my family was pretty poor.
A few quick examples of how poor we were. A. I often went to school without paper and needed supplies, because money just wasn't there. B. My mom got super sick with some sort of flu and my sister and I dug change out of the couch, the dirty clothes basket, and other places just to buy our mom medicine. C. We often had to cut open a toothpaste tube in order to scrape out the last bit of paste.
Anyhow, being poor like that as a child was challenging, but you get by. You get used to life like that when it's all you know. In 5th grade, however, an amazing opportunity came up, a 5-day trip to science camp. The school held fundraisers and bake sales to help pay the way for kids like me, and I was super excited to be going. The night before leaving, my mom packed everything she could from the list provided. Instead of a sleeping bag, I had an old and used comforter. Instead of a travel toothbrush set, I took my own and mom packed my toothpaste into a used lip balm container that she'd sanitized. Instead of pajamas, I was given an old sweatshirt that was my stepdad's and a pair of secondhand sweatpants, and so on. Literally everything I packed was used, secondhand, and worn, but I didn't care. I was so excited to be going to science camp with my class. Next day, we meet up, everyone packs their gear into the bus and I, with a rope holding my blanket in a bundle, load my stuff, clamber onto the bus, and soon we're on our way. We make it to camp, get a quick breakdown of camp rules, activities, and trips, and get assigned to our cabins. At this point, it might help to add that my school and several others booked the camp together. So, I was mixed into a cabin away from my class. No big deal to me, I was looking forward to making friends and memories. So, I dragged my stuff to the cabin. First bunk I find, I claim, which is where I encountered my first problem. Just about every girl in my cabin is from the same school and they all want to bunk together. My stuff was literally dumped onto the floor when I ran to use the washroom. The cabin leader decided it was easier to just move me, so, I got moved all the way to the back of the cabin, away from all but 2 other girls. Whatever, it's the first night. I figure it's gonna be great that a rough start isn't anything. Anyhow, we get through the evening, we do the activities sign-ups, we eat dinner, we go to bed. Tuesday morning comes, and I'm excited. Archery and a fossil hike are what I signed up for. Well, you guessed it, I get bumped because the activities lists are too full. Okay, it's cool, I can still do something else. I managed to find a night hike activity that accepted sign-ups. It's at night, so I have to mill about waiting. I go into the learning cabin, I look at their pickled specimens, I talk to the camp ranger, I kill time. Night comes and we finally go out on our hike to the lake with a giant dead goldfish in it. There are loads of crawfish and we feed them ham and learn about their environment. It's not what I had hoped for, but it was cool enough. Eventually we head back to our respective cabins for bed. Tomorrow will be better, after all. Wednesday comes, and it's only the same story as Tuesday. I signed up for clay arts and a nature walk, but clay arts is too full. Fine, I take my nature walk, we find a dead rabbit, we learn about edible plants, we discuss nature. Nothing to complain about, it was really fun, except for that evening. What is the craziest thing you have seen a teacher do? At my middle school we had a vice principal who fancied herself a dictator. Any tiny bit of power she got was an issue. But I was a middle schooler at the time and a good kid not often in trouble, so I didn't cross her path until 8th grade. Her friend was a bus driver named Pat. For 6th and 7th grade years we had an awesome bus driver. He was nice to the kids, let us put the windows down when the Georgia heat got too much etc. But he retired and the bus driver we got was an extremely angry middle-aged woman named Pat who did not like children and made that clear every day. The windows stay up or we go back to the school. She would yell as she had the only fan blowing in her face on a 100+ degree school bus. Ostensibly this was to keep us from throwing things out of the bus, but that was never an issue before or after. The real reason was that before the bus driver could leave the bus at the end of the day all the windows had to be back up and locked. So this saved her effort. My bus stop was the first she drove by but the last to pick up and had been that way for years. Pat changed this and decided she only wanted to stop on the first pass by and kept threatening to leave the kids in my neighborhood if we made her stop twice. I first got on the Karen VP's radar because Pat left me on the side of a very busy road one morning. She could have stopped but wagged her finger at me as she drove away and left me. I flipped off the kids laughing at me out of the back window, but the bus driver Pat thought I was flipping her off. I didn't get suspended because she left me with no way to get to school on the side of an extremely busy road and my mom threatened to sue if it happened again. But after that they had it out for me. Pat tried several times to get me on anything. She even coached a kid to say I bullied him, but when the real principal brought in the kid he said no, they are my friend. It was those other kids and a bunch of other little poop. Anything to get me in trouble. So the petty revenge comes in here. I was doing my best to make the bus driver's life hell in little passive aggressive ways. She got annoyed at anything so it was easy. But Karen was harder to do anything to. After fighting with the bus driver and the assistant principal for most of the year, revenge came in the form of a police fundraiser. They were advertising it on the local TV news and local radio stations. If you put someone up for arrest, the cops would show up and throw someone in handcuffs and put them in jail until they could call a few people and fundraise the bail. The person who set up the arrest had to pay like $10, but worth it. My mom, after being annoyed by Pat and Karen all year, put Karen, the assistant principal, up for arrest. The cops showed up and took her to the room where she could call her friends and raise the money for her to go. The idea was that mom was going to keep having her arrested as long as she could. Except no one would give her the bail money. Not even for a charity. So she ended up missing most of a day sitting in the police precinct trying to get anyone to put up enough money for her to leave. Eventually the cops told my mom that they had to let her go because it had gone on too long. She was the only one who didn't raise the bail money that day. Letting her know exactly how much she meant to everyone at the school felt great. I had a friend who heard her complaining about it later that day. She had called the principal who did donate some, but the other teachers gave nothing and none of her friends would help out. She apparently thought one of the teachers put her up for it. It's so minor and so petty it almost doesn't count. But when I left that school at the end of the year, mom went up and asked her how was jail. Before we walked away for the last time. First time I ever heard a re sound from a human. My polygamous fiancé is destroying me. I am monogamous. My fiancé is polyamorous. I am leaving her 2 months before our wedding and haven't told her yet. I didn't have an issue with her being poly. Still don't, to be honest. I've dated poly people casually in the past, and honestly we both thought this would be a fling, but we fell in love. We couldn't be apart. We couldn't stop thinking of each other. We supported each other. We carried each other. We moved in together. We want a family. We want kids. She's the best thing that's ever happened to me. I proposed last summer. I still love her. We have rules. She has 4 pre-existing partners from before we met. It's an out of sight out of mind mentality. She tells me who she is meeting, but no other details. Her idea to make it easier for me. Her partners don't live near us, so it's once in a blue moon she meets them. Some of those relationships are a decade old, so I've never asked her to be monogamous or to take it away from her. I've met her poly partners. They are great guys, most of them anyway. As a monogamous person it doesn't feel great, but I promised to support her, and considering we're engaged it was working. I want to leave her for a few reasons. She has maintained since our first date she doesn't like public displays of affection. No kissing, no touching. Hand holding is rare. She said it makes her really uncomfortable, so I don't do it. When she's with her partners though, it's completely different. She straddled one on a bar stool once, and rubbed her nose in his cheek, and when they stood up she rubbed against him. In front of me. Another time we were in a group picnic and one of them showed up and she kept rubbing her hands between his legs. It's not comfortable for me, but I let it go. She's with me almost the entire year bar for like 4 to 5 days when someone comes into town. But firstly, she's breaking our rules. She knows she's not supposed to do that in front of me. We agreed to it together. Secondly, she never does that with me. Not once. And that's draining. It finally came to a head for me when she wanted to throw a party for us for our engagement because we never had one. One of her partners flew in to surprise her. She got intoxicated, and if we weren't in public they would have ended up having intimacy in that bar. They were running their hands underneath their clothes with me sitting a few feet from them. Our friends kept asking me if I was okay, it was that intense. I had to step outside and she came after me after a few minutes. She started crying, I tried to hug her to tell her it's okay and she shoved me away and went back in. We didn't speak the rest of the night. Later that night she wanted to sleep with me and I just wasn't in the mood. I started thinking over the things over the years that have happened between us, especially when it comes to intimacy and affection. She is into very vanilla stuff. I am not. She's the first person I've had vanilla with since I lost my V card. She doesn't even want a spoon because she says she doesn't like it. I found out she performs anal with one of her partners, and does other things that are a no-no in our bedroom with them because she says it's just one night out of the year and allows it even if she doesn't like it. She does things she knows I enjoy, but she won't do them with me. I respect her choices, so I don't do them. She's important to me. About a year into us living together I found a massive toy in her things. She told me she doesn't like toys because they feel too artificial and she doesn't want something like that in her. It turns out that the toy is reserved for one of her partners to play with her because he likes it. It's there for just one night a year when she lets it go. Then I found out she went hiking with one of them and they ended up having intimacy in public. We were at a private spot at a beach once and when I joked about it she said absolutely not, so don't do that. I realized I'm the safe option. I'm just the person who she can come home to. I don't need to worry about what happens in public or in bed. I only do the things she enjoys for her sake. I don't like being the safe option. I used to be wild before I met her. And I don't understand, if these were people who she has a decade of relationships with, why don't they know she doesn't like any of this? I spoke to her about public displays of affection, not even intimacy, once and asked her why she won't do them with me but she straight up gropes her other partners in public. She got mad and told me I was jealous. Her poly friends told me the same thing. That I'm being jealous and that polyamory is about letting jealousy go. Everything I've read online talks about jealousy. Jealous, jealous, jealous. Of course I'm jealous. I'm hurt. I'm human and I have needs and desires too. Jealous just seems like the umbrella term for an excuse. Does that make me wrong to want to be affectionate with my partner, but I'm apparently the only one who respects her likes and wishes? If someone flirts with me, she's immediately on it. She makes it clear to them I'm taken. She will argue and fight if she needs to. She tells me all the time if I cheat on her she'll leave me. If I sleep with anyone else she'll leave me. She knows I won't do polygamy, it's not my thing, and I would never cheat on her. The chances have happened, and I've shot it down immediately. I only want her. So I want to end our relationship and our engagement. I love her, but maybe I need to think of myself. I don't want to leave her. What do you think? What is a genetics fact that not a lot of people know? 1. Cheetahs are extremely inbred. They had a massive bottleneck about 10,000 years ago and had too little diversity to fully recover. 2. Red hair and blue eyes is the rarest hair and eye color combination. 3. Twins can have different fathers. 4. Potatoes have more chromosomes than humans. 5. Since navel oranges have no seeds, they are all clones of the original mutated fruit discovered by a Brazilian monk a century ago. The billions and billions of navel oranges that have been grown, sold and consumed since are all genetically identical. 6. Just because you date an above average height person doesn't mean your children will match or exceed the height of the taller person. Especially if you're very short. 7. Depression can be genetic. 8. Some genetic diseases persist because having one copy of the disease-causing version of that gene can have benefits. So even though having 2 copies is deadly, that copy of the gene doesn't go away in the population. 9. 40 to 50% of our DNA is the same as cabbage. For some people, it's significantly higher. I just had a conversation with a man who must have been 98% cabbage. 10. Your hair shape changes with hormones. I always hear about women experiencing texture changes when pregnant or during menopause. 11. There's this thing called a CHU syndrome, where it's estimated that 18 to 35% of people on Earth have a reflex that induces sneezing due to bright lights. Used to always tell my mom the sun makes me sneeze when I was a kid, it still happens and I'm 30. 12. The first CRISPR-Cas treatment for sickle cell has just been approved by the FDA. 13. Thanks to communism, it's possible for a woman to bear children to which she is technically their aunt, not their mother. 14. Since our mitochondria used to be separate single-celled organisms, they have their own DNA. 15. Two brown-eyed parents can have a blue-eyed child. 16. Identical twins kids aren't cousins to each other, but siblings. 17. Having 5 fingers in each hand is a recessive gene. Polydactyly having 6 fingers on each hand is a dominant gene. 18. There's a genetic disease called Laron syndrome that makes you shorter in stature, a longer life expectancy and near immunity to cancer and diabetes. 19. Gastrointestinal issues can be passed on by parents, they run in your genes.